Well, good evening, good evening, good evening to the members of the loyal opposition. What a pleasure it is and an honor for me to be back with you this evening, Monday, September the 30th, the last day of September. My goodness, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. We are just 3 months away from the end of 2024, and it's like we just started. But time is flying. I tell you, it's just ringing by at such a heck of a rate. But nevertheless, we're here this evening, and I want to welcome you and I want to thank you for being here as the loyal opposition this evening. Of course, we are grateful to have every single one of you. I don't get to call all the names, and if I miss your name, please don't hold it against me. Of course, Queen B, I know you're there. Tironi Hall, Charlie Lord, Judy Jills, welcome this evening. Bonnie Springer, CG, it's me. Blessings to you as well. Monica Ince and Jefferson Sobers, FX Trading BB, great to have you back with us again, FX. Always a pleasure to have you there. Marcia, I know you're going to be the one keep me on my P's and Q's when it comes to that national anthem. And Dave has it queued up. Look, even before I get into the show, and before I forget, let me just express my gratitude to Dave Weeks for the tremendous job he does behind the scenes to keep everything moving so smoothly and so connected. All right, so let's give him a hail out. Make sure you put it in the chat and you give him a real hail out tonight. All right, because Dave is really very active in the background. Fabian, Sandra Brewster, great to have you. Mildred Ben, thank you for being here tonight. I'm looking for an individual, Remy M, 6070, Clytie Vaughn. I hope I have that right. Clytie Vaughn, Clytie Vaughn, Flo Joe Maloney. I know Flo Joe was one of my favorite sprinters in the US. There's the gentleman I was looking for, Sir Alfred Benjamin. Good evening, sir. And so good to have you with us again this evening, Queen. McQueeness. Oh, great to have you with us this evening. Jacqueline Aline, Verlin Garns, Owen Hines, Bim the Beautiful. Absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful Barbados. Hey, Bim. Jacqueline Aline, Nat Grant, and Diana Husbands. A real joy to have you all with us. We're at 168. I'm going to give the others a few more moments, a few more minutes to just join us before we have that national anthem as soon as we clear 200. Okay, Marcia, as soon as we clear 200, I'm going to go for that national anthem. Judy Jills, really great to have you again with us this evening. Bajan boy, good evening to you too. Errol Callender, great to have you watching from Connecticut. Oh my goodness. I'm going to try to do a tour one of these years. You never know. Could be next year, and see if I can get up into y'all areas and do some singing and whatnot up that side of the world, and just get to see you guys. Pauline Maynard, great to see you as well. Thank you so very much. Cynthia Thorpe and Mildred Ben, a great pleasure to have you joining us this evening. All of you from the loyal opposition, a real pleasure on the behalf of all of the presenters here on the Marcia Week show. Of course, on behalf of Marcia, a real great welcome to you on the show this evening. Errol Callender and Jaleeve Designs, Monica Ince. Really a pleasure to have you, Marcia Miller, with us this evening. Yes, please like and share and listen. Get those thumbs up, okay? Get those thumbs up. We have 220 people. We should have 220 shares. Thumbs up by now. Just make sure. Are you serious, Sir Alfred? Are you serious? I tell you, why didn't you tell me that earlier? August the 13th? My goodness. Well, belated birthday greetings to you. Oh my goodness. Wow, wow, wow. I tell you, we're gonna have to connect, man. Come on. We're gonna have to connect, fly and meet somewhere in the middle and celebrate our birthdays together. Oh my goodness. So welcome to all of you. Really a pleasure to have you with us. Of course, as I said, we're going to move quickly into the evening because I want to redeem the time. There's quite a bit that we're going to be talking about this evening. We've been having issues with our educational system. We've been having issues with our water. I don't know there's anything we're not having issues with. And of course, we want to check in on one or two and one or two of the international matters that have a direct bearing on Barbados. All right, so I'm going to ask Dave to get that national anthem ready, and once he just gives me that little thumbs up, he'll shoot me a private message here, and he'll let me know we're ready to go. And I'll just let you go right ahead. Okay, Sir Dave, would you let that national anthem rip, sir, in plenty and in time of need? Let's all stand quickly. Amen, amen, amen. Strict guardians of our heritage, firm craftsmen of our faith. Now, our national pledge. I pledge allegiance to my country, Barbados, and to my flag, to uphold and defend their honor, and by my living to do credit to my nation wherever I go. Thank you all so much for joining us in the national anthem, for singing right along, and with the national pledge. I really appreciate you all being not only loyal opposition but really true citizens of the country of Barbados. It's a real joy and pleasure for me to be a part of this grouping and to welcome all of you here tonight. Now, as it speaks to this national anthem, I want to say to you tonight, for the few minutes that I have with you, that our sovereignty is under threat. And I want to say this to you because just over the past week, as you would know, our Prime Minister has been very busy with a number of different speeches in the UN, at the Global Summit there, and on a couple of other matters, which I'm going to touch on tonight. As a matter of fact, just last week, the United Nations adopted a matter called the Pact for the Future, which lays the foundation for a new global order. And our country, our Prime Minister, has signed us on to this matter, to this pact. Now, let me explain to you very quickly how this pact has been engaged. It has been engaged. There are two parts to it. One has to do with science and technology. The second one has to do with youth and future generations. And I understand it's a very egregious pact, a very egregious matter that we are facing. And it was embraced, it was enacted through a process called silence procedure, which means fundamentally that it was a pact that was adopted without a vote, which, if no one objected, it was automatically adopted and put in record as completely adopted. So, in the absence of any objections, which there were none, um, the pact was adopted. And if you want to, I can try to put the link in the chat here for you, that you can go and read it for yourself. But it's a quite an interesting and egregious document. It does have some very floral language, really very nice language, but that is how these globalists and these elitist people um, have, and I don't know if you can see it. Just confirm with me that you can see it. Some of these people who are fundamentally unelected bureaucrats have established a pact that governs the that governs and promotes the government of the United Nations, shifting from a grouping of nations to a governing body. In other words, the United Nations has been introduced now since last week as the new world government. And that is now in addition. Wonderful. Thank you, Marcia. That is in addition to its role before. Now, it has adopted a number of the World Health Organization's, their points, so to speak, that they tried to get past and was resisted. But what the World Health Organization did is that they went around the people and they came in through the back door, so to speak, and brought it to the United Nations General Assembly for it to be passed. And it was done by what is called the silent procedure, which means that nobody spoke out about it, spoke out against it, nothing of that sort. And so the World Health Organization, they couldn't get what they wanted through a agreement that they were trying to compel members of the different countries to embrace, which would give the World Health Organization the right to take control of the sovereignty of a nation in the event of another global emergency, not just a pandemic, a global emergency. So they went around through the back door, brought it into the UN General Assembly, and it has been now adopted by the UN, 193 nations. What it does that is very concerning is that it fully digitizes and maximizes the control. And they actually say this in the document: it's to fully digitize and maximize the control of the masses. And I'm just going to very quickly share with you a couple of the areas that it impacts. Now, while some areas may treat to matters of terrorism and so on, you can begin to see, listen to me very carefully, you can begin to see the similarities between our Barbados Trident ID and our cybercrime bill by what I'm about to share with you. And I'm just going to give you some quick points that you will be able to go do your own research. I do want you to read the document. It's just 56 pages long. You can read it and you can make your notes and your marks. But what it will do, or what it's intended to do, is that you will no longer be considered a citizen of Barbados only, but you will now be a citizen of you will now become a global citizen. You will now become a member of a global country, where we are no longer going to be talking about Barbados or St. Vincent or United Kingdom, but we're now all going to be a part of a global family. I don't know. I want to be a part of a global family. I like being a Barbadian. I like being an outstanding Barbadian. I like to know that my country is unique and I'm not just a part of a global entity. So that is one of the things that it's going to do. It says that all must have biometric digital ID. all must have biometric digital ID. So you can now begin to see, as I told you several weeks ago, several months ago, that a lot of what is happening in Barbados is not really originating within Barbados, but it is the globalists, the global elitists, unelected bureaucrats that are calling the shots where Barbados is concerned. And not Barbados alone. They're trying it with countries all around the world. And Barbados has adopted it. Barbados has bought into it and embraced it fully. Our Prime Minister has carried us into it. It also marks them not just as a citizen of an individual country, but as a global citizen. It goes on to indicate that all dissenting opinions will be labeled as misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, and that labeling will be put in a memory hole. So once you are labeled, you won't be able to get out of that position. All right. Now, again, this plays into the matter of our cybercrime bill right here in Barbados. And it shows us that a lot of what is being promoted here does not begin in Barbados, but it begins overseas in the UN, the World Health Organization, and other international agencies that we have not elected to protect our sovereignty, our constitution, and to look after the well-being of our people. It goes on to indicate that perpetrators for unapproved information will be fact-checked by AI, and they will be punished by the system operated and enforced by AI. I want you to hear this. They will be punished by systems operated and enforced by AI. Some people may be saying to me, but Rev, what does that have to do with Barbados? Everything, because we have been brought into a global country, not just Barbados anymore, but we are now global citizens. So we will now fall under the jurisdiction of the United Nations, not simply Barbados. And that is what our government has signed on to. It goes on to make the point that dissidents, those persons who are unapproved, who are spreading unapproved information, and remember, our cybercrime bill here in Barbados has threatened the people who are on social media and other mediums. It has threatened us with $100,000, $100,000 fine and 10 years in prison if you post something that is considered disinformation or egregious or offensive or hurt somebody's feelings or whatever. Yes, they have, my friend. They have adopted it. Well, yeah, I understand. Yeah, I got it. It is the PM. But you see, Hurricane, once the PM signs, she signs on the behalf of the people of Barbados. And I'm going to share one other thing with you quickly that Barbadians are not aware of that came up last night. I listened to the program last night, and I want to repeat it again tonight for your information. But it also indicates that if you are a perpetrator of unapproved information, which will be fact-checked by AI, and you will be punished by a system operated and enforced by AI, not by a human being, by artificial intelligence. Here are some of the punishments. One, you will be locked out of your bank account. That is why we have resisted the Trident ID card. Now you're beginning to understand, because I'm painting the global picture, because we have been brought in by our PM signing on to this silent pact of the future, and bringing us as a country into this one world government system. And as a result of that, if you do not conform to all that they want, then yes, Anthony, I can come to that. Then these are some of the things that will happen. You will be locked out of your bank account. You will be unable to make certain purchases. You will be unable to travel by plane or train or bus or whatever. You will not be allowed travel, including driving on the public highways. And you will notice that we have had some cameras installed in our country, some of those big black cameras. Anyone can do the research, but some of those cameras are facial recognition cameras, not just identify no ID on your number plate. Some of those cameras are facial ID cameras. You see, this is one of the reasons that the bureaucrats, the globalists, these global leaders who are unelected, nobody in elect them to represent us. These people have nothing to do with our countries. We did not vote for them. We did not vote for Charles Schwab or any of them. Okay, let's understand what is going on where this is concerned. All right, and you can see some of the information there, and you can read, you can do your own research to see some of the areas of deep concern for countries around the world. Now, I have done my best to alert you to this information so that you realize that Barbados is now a part of a global one world government. That is now a reality. I know there are people who want to chastise folk for the Bible, but I'm saying to you right now, the Bible was explicitly accurate in terms of clearly indicating that in the end of the age, there will be a one world government. You are witnessing the shift from the UN being a representative body of people who are meeting to engage resolution on matters to now governing, so that in the event of another global emergency, and you will notice there's conversation about gun violence across the world. So crime and violence can become a global emergency. A pandemic can become a global emergency. We heard the Prime Minister speaking in one of the forums to do with these antibiotic matters, speaking about that becoming a global emergency. In the event of a global emergency, what will happen is that the UN will take control and will take over the governance of all 193 countries, including the transmission of information within every single country. That is devilish and wicked and evil. And the Bible has made it clear that that is a plan, a ploy that we have now watched played out by Satan himself. Now, you may not agree with me, but of course, I'm telling you quite clearly that these are some of the things that this Pact for the Future embraces and addresses. It promises a number of things, very floral and colorful language, very meaningful expressions, and so on, that if you just read it, it sounds so beautiful and hunky-dory. But when you begin to dig into the document and the implications of the document as it relates to the sovereignty of countries, that's another matter. Now, I will let you know that the United States Congress has begun to oppose this matter. In terms of the fact that they're strongly indicating that they are not prepared to surrender the sovereignty of the United States to any entity that is not American. That is their position. Okay, and I believe it ought to be ours as well. I remember some years ago when Prime Minister Owen Arthur was Prime Minister, and I think it was George Bush that was President of the United States of America at the time, and there was this so-called shipwriters agreement that would give the United States of America the right to pursue drug vessels and drug lords and so on all the way into our territorial waters without informing any member of the Caribbean, any country or government, of their coming into your waters and pursuing and carrying out arrest activity and so on in our waters without our knowledge or consent. And Mr. Arthur said, not in Barbados. If you're going to come into our waters, you have to coordinate that with us, and you have to get our consent to come into our territorial waters in pursuit of any vessel or whatever, because that's the extent of our sovereignty. And why would any leader of a country surrender its sovereignty to a group of people who have no interest in our countries whatsoever? That in itself is mind-boggling. All right, so I just wanted to share that with you very quickly. excuse me, very quickly. And I also want to share with you very quickly something that was brought to my attention last night, which I must confess I did not realize until I heard it mentioned in the session last night. I believe it was mentioned in the session last night, and that is that Barbados, and I'm just trying to make sure I get it correct. Barbados, let me get it because I don't want to misquote anybody. But Barbados, there has been a travel a travel emergency issued for Barbados. And we didn't know this. Nobody told us this in Barbados. A travel advisory has been issued by the government of the United Kingdom, to the best of my knowledge. I'm just trying to locate it here very quickly. Um, I want to be sure. I'm pretty sure that they spoke about it. They spoke about it last night. And just want to try and get this here. Got so many things on my phone, but it was issued by the here it is. Um, the government of the UK has issued a travel advisory concerning Barbados. There, and listen to what it says. There is a high threat of terrorist attack globally affecting UK interests and British nationals, including groups and individuals uh, who view the UK and British nationals as targets. It goes on to say, although there's no recent history of terrorism in Barbados, attacks cannot be ruled out. There have been incidents of violent crime, including armed robbery, sexual assault, gang related shootings. There has been an increase in gang related murders involving guns. Some incidents have taken place in populated and public areas. Take sensible precautions to protect your personal safety. Make sure your accommodations are secure. Take care walking alone off busy main roads. Avoid isolated areas and so forth. Okay? And that has been issued. I don't recall hearing anything from the government with regards to this, or anything from any media that covered this to alert us to the fact that the UK government, which I understand from Europe, our European partners are some of our most prolific tourists coming from that area, because I understand there was some link between some mention in the Prime Minister's press conference about terrorism. I haven't had the chance yet to look at it personally, but you can't do that. Not just like that, because the rest of the world is watching. The Prime Minister needs to understand that it is not just at the United Nations fancy doodah meetings and private meetings that people get to see you. YouTube is there, and YouTube never loses its videos unless you violate the aspects and rules and regulations of YouTube. That video stays up there, and that press conference is there for all to see. Remember, I want money. I want money. Very disrespectful and not becoming of a prime minister. And then you come before the UN and these global entities and you speak with such eloquence and dignity and so forth. And then the people get to see who you really are in those videos. So I want to caution all of us and alert us to wake up and get our eyes open to understand what we are being carried into in an international level that is going to be having a direct impact on our country, Barbados. And that's not the only thing. I could delve into a number of other areas, but I see my good friend, Mr. Nigel Newton, is here. The last time we were together, he was sharing some tremendous information with regards to the aspect of genocide relating to Black people. And it is while, and I want to be clear, I am not racist. None of us are racist, but truth is truth. And sooner or later, we are going to have to wake up to that reality. I have watched a video with Mr. Bill Gates speaking concerning the aspect of of carbon dioxide emissions, and he speaks about reducing the footprint of carbon dioxide. And the first point he made was getting to the population. And the country he immediately spoke of was Africa. And I am not going to say any more about that because I'm sure that this evening Mr. Newton has some interesting information to share with us. So, Nigel, I want to give you your maximum time because I know that you are always so interesting and you're always, there is so much that you share with us, not only concerning where we are today, but where we have come from. And I believe that if we don't pay attention to where we have come from, then we are running the risk of repeating some of those things. So, good evening, Nigel. On behalf of the loyal opposition, we welcome you to the Marcia Week Show. A pleasure to have you joining us tonight, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nichols, and a very pleasant and beautiful night to the loyal sons and daughters all. And we are going to continue our discussion from last week. And I think that in support or to substantiate what I have had proposed last week, we need to pay some attention to what is happening in St. Lucie. That is also part of the genocide that is afflicting Black people the world over. Okay, but I believe that there were some questions that you had remaining from last week, and I am wondering if you would want to um, go through those questions, and then perhaps afterwards we will deal
We
with.
can see how we do with the others. Well, I believe
Yeah.
the first question that we had, do you believe there's currently genocide of black men worldwide? I believe we had addressed that, but I don't know if you want to very quickly just give a reminder of what that is in terms of whether you believe there's currently genocide of black men worldwide. And I guess, and folk, the reason we're focusing on men is because, contrary to popular belief, the expansion and perpetuation of a race lies in the loins of men. All
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
a man carries the seed. That is it. That's why there is a target on men. You understand? And so, and then the second question, and we can go to the others, Nigel. But just to give you the two of them, if you believe there's currently genocide of black men worldwide, and is this genocide systemic? And if so, please explain. So let me give you the two of those to address.
Yes. Well, I hope everyone would recall some of what I said last week. There is definitely a genocide against Black people, but men in particular, because as you rightly said, the future of humanity lies in the loins of the Black man, or the future of the Black race. Without the Black man, there can be no children or no future. Okay? And that genocide is not 2 mornings old, you know.
Hmm.
It has been going on for centuries. Okay? And I think I brought to your attention rather the case of the Turks who went into the Sudan, and they murdered so many people, men, women, and children at that time, that even the white world protested against what they were doing to the Sudanese people or the Black people in the Nile. And then,
Wow.
of course, I recounted the story, not the story, but the history of the Arab slave trade across the Sahara Desert, where thousands of people, Black people, particularly men, died. And I'll tell you, one of the main features of that genocide against Black people and Black men was that every Black man was castrated,
Wow.
and thousands of them died from infection in the Sahara Desert and
Wow.
wherever else they were castrated. Because the reason for that is that the threat to other people lies in the loins of the black man. That will, and I think you would know about white supremacy,
Hmm.
and the black man has the potential through his genetic material to wipe out all others so that there will be only perhaps just black people on the face of the earth. So those are just two examples, and I think it is systematic. It is a world, and for example, don't you think that what is happening in St. Lucie is part of or can be likened unto a genocide? Because the earth as it stands is mainly water. Our bodies are mainly water, and water is the essence of life. So if you are contaminating the water supply, if you are limiting the water supply of a people, are you not committing genocide?
But what is even more concerning, and I am just trying to tie the situation in St. Lucie with what you're sharing, um, because I did read somewhere that there has been an increase in the chlorinating, if I'm using the right word. Nigel, I'm used to creating words, all right? Because I,
Yes,
I felt that just like Webster could do his dictionary, I could do mine too. So if I create a word or two, please excuse me. But, increasing the chlorine content. But chlorine
yes,
is a very dangerous product.
yes.
Chlorine can really have a very negative effect on the health
Good.
of an individual. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to take it up from that perspective as well.
Of course, yes, the chlorine content in the water, and I think they also use fluoridation, they call it, right?
Hmm.
They put
Hmm.
fluoride in the water. And now when you compound that with the silt that is going into the water supply, and I am suspicious that the contamination of the water in St. Lucie is linked to the heavy development in the northern part of the island, St. Peter, St. Well, yes, mainly St. Peter,
St.
St.
Lucie,
Lucie, and
yes.
parts of St. Andrew. Okay, there is a connection.
But I have traveled down along that west coast, Nigel, all down the west coast, and I was shocked actually as I got into uh, Speightstown and moving from Speightstown, then going north along the coastline, how many high-end properties were along that street. I lived down in Boscobel for several years, nearly 7 years, so I know what that area is like before any of the development that we had, that we see there now, existed. And then, as you say, we see something happening in the east coast as well. But then I have
Yes,
also heard about the matter to do with the area by Wellington Street, where it would not
yes,
surprise me in the least if there is not, I don't know, I can't say the government is deliberately doing anything, but I'm asking the question, Nigel, is it a plan to relocate all the people of that area so that that entire area can be sold out to high net worth clients or high end people so that they can develop that area? Because keep in mind, the Hyatt Hotel is going right across the street from them.
yes, Dr. Nichols, we are seeing the systematic gentrification of Barbados. And you remember in one of my previous presentations, I mentioned the fact that all the coastal areas of Barbados, they are taken up, and we are being forced into the center of the island with no contact or link to the beach. And if there's one thing that is sacred in Barbadian life, is a sea bath.
That's right.
And
That's
when
right.
you take up the entire sea coast and you prevent Barbadians from having access to the beach, what are you doing? Look at the psychological pressure. Look at Look at all the destruction, the total destruction of indigenous Barbadians. Yes, so it is a systematic and deliberate plan to gentrify, to expand the gentrification of Barbados, and we then become second, third, or fourth class citizens in our own country.
Well, Nigel, let me ask you another question. Do you think that black people, and more specifically Barbadians, but black people are willing participants in this process, in this genocidal process? Do you
Of
think
course
we
they
are
are. Of
willing?
course they are. Of course they are. And the most recent and the most glaring example of that willing participation in our genocide is what the Prime Minister signed in at the United Nations a couple of days ago. Okay, that is part and parcel of the whole problem. All right, and there is another one, but all this, and she did that willingly without our permission. She
Hmm.
has no authority to do that. Yes, she's prime minister, but does she have the authority to sell Barbados, to
Well,
sign away Barbados?
it would appear that she thinks she does, because we have all the property from um, the defense force all the way down the Bay Street, all the way into Bridgetown for sale, and
And
certainly not for sale to Barbadians.
exactly, and that is why at this stage of our development, we now need, we the people, we the citizens of Barbados, need to wake up and realize that we have to limit the power of government. There's no mistaking about that. We have to limit the power of government. We also have to enact Alien Landholding Act. Barbados is too small with a high density population. And when we sell out all the land to foreigners who are hostile to us, what are we doing? Are we not committing genocide?
I was
And
just
and are
go
we
ahead.
not willing? And are we not willing participants? And then the issue of gun violence. Now, why would a young black man think that it is so nice and powerful and mature to own a AK-47 or whatever else, another high-powered uh, gun? And he goes out there. I think we heard about that 17-year-old guy who emptied the barrel of a high-powered rifle or something like that in the murder of one man. And isn't that a sign of our willing participation
Participation.
and cooperation in killing off black
Chapman,
people? Because you don't see it among Indians, you don't see it among white people, you're certainly not going to see it among Chinese or Arabs, but it is happening among us. Are we not willing participants?
but Nigel, why do you think? I mean, I know that our heritage is African. We are well aware of that. We are well aware that the black race that exists in the Caribbean and in North America has its roots in Africa. We understand that, but and we also understand that in Africa there is a lot of tribal, nothing to do with Europeans, nothing to do with colonial masters. There is a lot of tribal conflict in Africa. Do you think that that was taken advantage of during the development of the slave trade through our indoctrination and colonization by the Europeans?
Most definitely, Dr. Nichols, most definitely. It was taken serious advantage of. Okay, you recall the 1884 Berlin Conference,
I've heard of it, yes.
where Bismarck, I think it was, he and the other European leaders, including that vagabond uh, what's his name again? King Leopold of Denmark, or where,
Mhm,
eh, that said he owned the Democratic Republic of Congo,
mhm, mhm.
right? Okay, well, you see, we have to understand that when the Europeans went in to Africa, they just sat around a table and drew lines on the map of Africa and say, this part belonged to me, this part belonged to you, this part belonged to the next person. And boundary lines were drawn straight through villages, separating families. Some family members became Dutch, others became German, and so they took advantage of the natural uh, familial division. Because, okay, for example, let me illustrate that. Your name is Nichols. Don't you have cousins who might be Cumberbatch and Greens and so on and so forth?
Well, I tell you, I'm learning about a lot of a lot of family that don't carry the name Nichols that's supposed to be related to me.
Okay, so it is a similar Oh, you're there still? It is a similar
Yeah.
situation. It is a similar situation. And that so-called tribal conflict was taken advantage of by the Europeans and played out of proportion, such that we think that Africans were always um, tribal and wicked and bad. What they were nation states in Africa and territorial states. But when the Europeans went in and the Arabs, don't forget the Arabs, when they went in, they caused division and strife among the African people to suit their own advantage.
Now, give your grant so that the people understand what we're talking about here, because there's a lot to be learned by going back in our history and seeing what has happened. Because our socialized DNA, so to speak, if I can put it that way, Nigel,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
has contributed to the attitude of Black people to each other. And let me be very specific. Right here in Barbados, I guess it would be the same thing in any other Caribbean territory, but this is where I live. I live here in Barbados, and the one thing I've observed is that Black people don't like to see another Black individual getting ahead. They don't like to see them succeeding. It's almost as if, you set up a business, you set up a little, let's say, a little hardware store. I saw one set up in my Lord's Hill, and now the place is run to ruins and grass growing up around it. It's almost as if, as a Black individual in a Black community, you have to fight 100 times harder than any other race in order to succeed in terms of getting the support from your people. But let me ask you this: are you suggesting then, Nigel, that there is a possibility, and asking a rhetorical question in the sense that I already know, but for the benefit of the people that are on the show tonight, are you suggesting that there's a real probability that the Africa that we are looking at today, in terms of how it's divided, in terms of Ethiopia and Kenya and so, may not have been how it was originally divided before the Europeans went in?
Yes, I am suggesting that. I am suggesting that because you had, for example, the Luos in Kenya. Then you have the Kalenjin, the Tukuyu. They all had their own niche
Hmm,
of
hmm.
land to develop. Okay, and they were what you call nation states. You may want to call them that,
Uh-huh.
but territorial states. But when the Europeans went in, as I said earlier, that was they took Kalenjin, Luos, Tukuyus, and they lumped them into one nation called Kenya. Okay,
Hmm.
such that the Luos had no power. They lost their cultural autonomy, so to speak. That is how I see it. Okay, and that was taken advantage of. Okay, that
Hmm.
was taken advantage of, and I think that if we as a people are to re-emerge as a force to reckon with, on the global stage, we are going to have to look within and resolve our own issues, whether it be tribalism. And by the way, in Kenya, you notice the Gen Z's revolution in Kenya. The
Hmm.
Gen Z's are saying, do away with the tribe. We are all one Kenyan. We are all one nation, Kenya. We are all Kenyans. And they're trying to push away tribalism, corruption, you name it. And I'm saying we have to uh, rethink and rebuild and so on and so forth. But I don't want to spend too much time on the problems. I think there are solutions
Yes, yes,
that
and
are necessary.
that's where what are some of these solutions? Because as I look at the as I look at the map and as I look at listen to what you're saying, how do we resolve these challenges that we have inherited? We've been born into the country, we come along and we find these things. I mean, I think it has had its impact on the political environment in Barbados. When one considers that as a government, our government has been black people, and it would appear that in many instances they're always putting a heavy load upon the back of their citizens. So, what would you say, Nigel, are some of the things that we can do to help eradicate this DNA that has been ingrained in us, that we can become the kind of people that we ought to have been?
We must first of all recognize the impact of acculturation. We have grown and accepted the culture of the enemy. I call it acculturation. Okay, then we need to realize that slavery and colonization has damaged us spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and economically. So we have been damaged in every area of human emotions, thinking, uh, every area of our lives have been damaged by slavery and colonization. We need to remember that. We need to keep that in focus, and we need to recognize the importance of self-healing.
Hmm.
We need to return to our traditional African cultural register, our constitution. Don't forget Chancellor Williams in his book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. He spoke, I think it is from around page 160. He gave about three chapters or three sections on traditional African constitutional law and the birth of African democracy. Okay, we need to go back to that and study it and see how we governed ourselves back then, because what we have today is not democracy.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
what
Okay.
what, what we have inherited from the British and the Europeans has absolutely nothing to do with democracy, and we must stop abusing ourselves by telling ourselves and telling the world that we are a democracy. We are not. So that's one of the first things that we have to do. Okay. Um, then another thing that we need to do is closely associated with that. We need to limit the power of government. The system of governance that we have today is a carryover from the crime syndicate that left Europe and went across the globe, committed genocide, and took control of other regions of the earth. And all that we have done is to accept that, legitimize it, and we are now pursuing it as though it is something given to us from God. But what we have is not democracy, and we need to limit the power of government as was clearly demonstrated by the action of the Prime Minister in New York just this weekend, signing over our sovereignty to who? A diabolical entity that is intent on world domination, an entity that has absolutely no respect or consideration for Black people.
You know, one of the I found it very interesting, Nigel. I was watching an interview with Denzel Washington. He's one of my
Yeah.
favorite actors, actually. I just absolutely love watching his pictures and so on and listening to him. He's such a motivation. And he
Okay.
was asked concerning the matter of racism. And it's interesting that you are talking about culture because his response indicated that the problem with us as Black people is not color, but culture.
Yes.
And you know, I just sat and started to meditate on that because we have adopted cultures that are foreign to us. You know, um, sorry, ladies, but you know, um, pantyhose is not for the Caribbean. It's for cold countries where you need to keep your legs warm. But we adopted that as a part of our dress. Our suits, you know, which are you remember Nigel? I don't know if you were alive at the time. I think you're a little older than me, so you had to be alive. I don't know, but you remember when Branford Tate went to Parliament in a shirt jack suit?
Of course
And
I do. I
you
remember
remember
that.
you remember everybody almost lost their minds to think that a man would be dare to go into Parliament in anything other than a suit. You remember
Yes.
that?
I
Because
remember.
that's a culture that we adopted. You know, you're really nobody. And I watch it happening in Africa. Now I've been involved on African platforms a lot in terms of sharing on leadership and peace ambassadors and so forth. And you know, they are such honorable people. They honored me with so many things. I got inducted into royalty and all that kind of stuff. And you know, I hesitated a little bit because I didn't know what it was all about. But I will talk with you about some of that when you know off the camera. I will talk with you
Okay.
about that. But you know, I feel that this is something you've hit on in terms of the culture of us as a Black people. We have a unique and very special and very celebrated culture that we do not acknowledge.
Yeah. You finish?
Yeah, 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 sure, go right
Yes.
ahead.
Yes. No,
Awaiting your comment.
you are correct. You see, um, when the colonizer and I hope we are not drifting away from the idea of genocide because all of this ties in.
All of it
Okay,
ties back. Yes.
it ties back into what we are saying. But yes, we well, you see, people don't realize, but we, the African people, were at one point the first. In fact, we were the first and the only people on the face of the earth.
Hmm. Hmm.
There was no, there were no other peoples on the face of the earth. But because of migration out of Africa to the different parts, different regions of the earth, and because of the process of biological climatology and albinism and the ice age, you get the various pigmentation and the different ethnic qualities that emerge over thousands of years and so on and so forth. But we were the only people on the face of the earth, and we had our own unique culture. Okay? And if you really want to understand the difference there, you will have to read, I think, a Cheikh Anta Diop. He spoke about the northern cradle of civilization and the southern cradle of civilization. And that happened because of the ice age, the last ice age. The northern cradle was in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia. The southern cradle was in the Nile Valley, what is now Egypt and Africa. Okay? The people were separated for over a period of thousands of years, but then they eventually reunited and met. So that is where the different cultures, that's part of the reason for the different cultures throughout the globe. In the northern cradle, the Eurasian steppes and so on and so forth, people develop over thousands of years and develop their own cultural norms and so on and so forth. We in Africa, on the other hand, we had our own, but of course, we have to remember that Africa is not a monolithic entity. There are different ethnic groups and cultural
Yes,
divisions
yes,
and so on and so forth, but
yes,
one people,
yes,
one
yes,
people. Okay, so
yes.
that is it. But the idea that we have to recognize, Dr. Nichols, that we are a special people. We have to go back and discover who we were and who we are as a people. And that is the first step in uh, securing ourselves and eliminating the crime and violence that is destroying self-inflicted crime and violence that is destroying young black men in Barbados. And of course, it will give us the strength of character and the integrity and the will and courage to resist oppression, like the oppression that we were signed over to in New York just this past week.
Wow, Nigel, I tell you, I'm going to have to sit down with you for a special session with you off of the air because I'm learning so much here, and I have not really ever engaged this aspect before because I hadn't been connected with an organization that was directly involved with Africa. When I was inducted as the International Governor and Peace Ambassador for the Academy of Universal Global Peace USA to Barbados. A part of my responsibilities is the aspect of training in matters like chaplaincy, matters of peace ambassador leadership, and so on. And a large number, let's say out of 900 participants in our sessions, over 700 of them were out of Africa. And so I got to meet a lot of Africans and began to learn a lot about Africa. And it's an intriguing subject. I must say, it's an intriguing country. Absolutely. And I'm looking forward. I've never been, but I'm looking forward to visiting and going there to experience the culture for myself. And I just want to say thank you to you. I mean, again, we've just run out of time again tonight. And there's just so much folk that we could continue with in terms of how we as a people need to reassess. And I don't know if I could probably use the word reset, Nigel. We need to reset.
Of
Um,
course, of
and
course.
one thing I will leave the loyal opposition with, and those who are listening to us. And I mentioned this to you. I was intrigued with war, World War II, and I love battleships and airplanes. The fighter jets and so on. I used to do the airfix models. Many people may not even know what they are, but I used to gather the airfix models and put them together. And one of the things I had thought, there was a bridge in Germany or in Europe called a viaduct, and I had always thought that the Europeans, I was thinking, wow, they made this massive structure that spans, these exceptionally deep valleys. And I thought they were the originators of it until about 3 years ago. I saw an article, an archaeological article, that discovered viaducts in Africa hundreds of years
Yeah,
before they were built in Europe. That
but don't,
speaks to the engineering. And Egypt is a part of Africa. And to this day, Nigel, no European can reproduce a pyramid.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. They cannot. They cannot. But you see, as I said, we were the first and only people on the face of the earth. And everything that has to do with civilization started with us.
Yes,
So
yes.
philosophy, religion, you name it, we created it. But anyway, I close this session, when I was a youngster, I was taken out of school at a very early age. And my hobby was to listen to the rediffusion, okay, and a neighbor's private radio. I started learning about Africa as a child, and I always wanted to know why are black people being treated the way they are being treated. And that started my journey in trying to
Mhm.
understand what is going on and so on and so forth. Yes, but we do have a genocide to put an end to.
Right, right. Well, Nigel, there are some who are asking to give the authors of the studies cited. So if you could probably drop that in a quick um, message to me in terms of the studies you cited, the different books and so forth that you cited just now. If you can just drop that in a message to me, a private message to me, and I will add it to the chat here tonight. But I want to thank you again, Nigel. My goodness, what an education for all of us to know where we have come from, what we have gone through, and some of the things that we need to do to recapture or reset what we ought to be in terms of a people. And just want to say thank you, Nigel, for sharing with us again tonight. You have to develop a class. You have to develop a class session that we can attend and be educated in these matters. So thank you so
Yes,
very much. Appreciate you sharing with us tonight. God bless you. Thank you so very much, Nigel. It was a pleasure
you're
having you on
welcome.
with us
Yes,
tonight.
thank you. Right, bye.
God bless. Well, I tell you, I see my next guest is up and ready. I think I see a smile on her face, which obviously tells me that she's ready to join me. I don't need to see a thumbs up. It is always a distinct pleasure of mine to have Maxine on the same evening that I am on.
Uh,
And I must say, Maxine, that I miss having Caswell on the same time as well. But I understand that he's not been well. And so we want to
mhm.
pray for his speedy recovery, that he comes back. But welcome, Maxine, to the show tonight. We just had a real education from Nigel, I must tell you. Just sitting and listening to our history and what we have come from and what we have come through and some of the things that we can look at in terms of resetting is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. And I must say that as a country, we definitely need to reevaluate our politics. No question about that. But Madam, welcome to the show tonight. It's such a
Thank
joy to
you.
have you.
Thank you.
Such
It's
a joy
good to
to
be
have
back.
you.
I had a nice little break, and I want to say, get well soon, Caswell. I know he's been
Yes.
carrying a lot. I was telling Marcia that as a trade unionist, he has been called upon by so many people to
Yes,
address
yes.
issues being that have not been addressed adequately, if at all, by other trade unionists, and it is a lot of work that he is carrying. So, but I'm happy to be back whole.
And it's
Let me
such a
quickly
joy to have you back and to have you back safely. Maxine,
thanks.
I don't take that for granted, with the number
No,
of
it
things
is
that are
true.
happening
If
with aircraft these days.
in
I
fact,
don't
I
take
will
it for
say
granted.
this. I was following the show. Yeah, you're correct. Not only aircraft, airports, everything.
Yeah, yeah.
When I last spoke, I was telling Marcia of looking forward to being in Kenya. But the interesting thing very quickly was, because I saw some people commenting and wishing me a happy holiday there, was that I turned up at the airport in the morning to learn that the airport was closed because of industrial action, and they had routed me through Ghana, which I
Wow,
might not have
wow.
minded, but I mean that's west. You look at the map, and I
Yeah, yeah.
haven't considered all and the general tensions that were in the country during the period. I thought that I would not I would reschedule and so
Mhm,
on.
mhm.
But I'm here to talk about something that I see in front of me. Prime Minister Mottley studying contradictions. And as I listened to your opening comments, most of them I was able to capture, and to Nigel's discussion, I'm a historian, armchair historian, and so I listened to that. But I also listened to that within the context of some of the concerns that people have been expressing in relation to United Nations. And let me very quickly say some things, because I think that I needed to offer clarification to you and listeners in relation to how the process works.
Mhm.
Because the reality is when the prime minister goes and speaks, and in this instance, she spoke at the General Assembly for 34 minutes and something. I would say
Mhm.
35 if I round it. The reality is leaders usually observe, as they describe it, a voluntary 15-minute limit. So the prime minister went over the time by 100% and more. So when you think about it, what does a head of state or a representative do in that time frame? And really and truly, I listened, and I'm not going to comment so much on. Well, I'm not going to comment so much about what was said in relation to Israel. I will speak about that another time. But I want to look at, when I talk about a study in contradictions, the Prime Minister of Barbados has decided that she will typically be the spokesperson on behalf of Barbados. And that's a little unusual. Many of us would recall that when Oenatha was Prime Minister, Dame Billy Miller, as Foreign Minister, was the person we listened to addressing the United Nations. And similarly, other prime ministers would have followed suit. I can tell you that, well, because he was ill in 2010, I know that Prime Minister Thompson addressed the Assembly once. Prime Minister Stewart addressed it twice that I recall, because he did it, and they usually do it when they first become Prime Minister and on special occasions. So when the United Nations celebrated its 70th anniversary, that would have been in 2015. Prime Minister Stewart went a second time, and so the task fell on me almost annually to do that. And I raised that because when I talk about contradictions, sitting a little bit away from Barbados for the last almost 3 weeks, you are reminded. I mean, because you are away and you're less occupied with a whole set of things. Let me put it positively. You have more time on your hands, you're on holiday, and you get to listen and observe and get reactions to what is happening. And over again, in talking to Barbadian friends living overseas, there's a concern about what is happening in Barbados. You mentioned the travel advisory, which came as a shock to me last night when I listened to the show, because there was nothing mentioned. And
Mhm.
I'm not going to spend time with this, but I recommend that for the last 10 years, Barbadians can go back and do an examination on the number of advisories that would have been issued by, whether it's the United States, Canada, or the UK, and how the media made a big issue of that. Now, I say that within the context of crime
Mhm.
and the unprecedented large number of murders that have been taking place, is part of what concerns Barbadians and is part of what is characterizing us now. And my concern, therefore, when I talk about contradictions, you have the Prime Minister of Barbados in the first 10 minutes of her speech. And I took pains to list these things. And she mentioned some of these things. She mentioned the climate crisis, the
Mhm.
legacy of the pandemic, multiple
Yes.
theaters of war instead of pursued development, rising cost of living, stick a pin next to that. She
Mhm.
mentioned the
Mhm.
antimicrobial resistance, which is an issue
Yes.
from a health perspective that's important. She mentioned NCDs. She called for what she said was a pause and a reset. And then she called for delivering new opportunities to address dampened economic growth. I'm going to stick a pin there and speak to those, and then speak to some of the others. Now, the question I have, what are you doing, Madam Prime Minister, to deal with some of these issues as they impact Barbados? Let's look at the climate crisis. Agriculture. We have heard about the plans to build a what was some kind of bond to handle foods and etc. But what are we doing when we talk about food security and food safety? What efforts are we seriously putting into agriculture to make sure that we have a level of protection for food? You might have heard recently of planned strikes by dock workers in America.
Yes.
That's a serious, that's an issue. So in the same way that we had to worry about the pandemic and all that did to shipping and logistics, etc., we are still dealing with the legacy. And one of the areas that we have to focus on is being able to eat. As I said, reference was made to opportunities to address the dampened economic growth. We have heard in this country about a lot of borrowing, but my question to the Honorable Prime Minister is, can you tell us what are the current government and private sector strategies? Because government works along with the private sector. And in the case of the Prime Minister, she has, even as the leader of the opposition, been able to mobilize the private sector in ways that are interesting, but I don't want to belabor that point. But the question is, on the ground in Barbados, as you move around in the international arenas that you do, what are you doing to create opportunities for young people? And the first one I'm talking about is the employment of the many graduates of our educational system on an annual basis, because we can start looking at the numbers and we can start and against the background of a public sector. Let's park the private sector for the minute. Against the background of a public sector which has been downsizing. In other words, the average high school, secondary school graduate, or the average university graduate who is not working or who has not been working and looking for a job, how many of them can be absorbed routinely in the public sector at this time? So my question to the Prime Minister is, while you are highlighting all of these things, how does it translate into action domestic?
In Barbados, yes,
in
absolutely.
other words, when you go and you spend twice as much time as other people speaking, and are you demonstrating that while you highlight these problems, can you demonstrate that you are an exemplar in some way or form or fashion to show the world this is what we're doing on this little 166 square miles? Because it sounds good to list all of these things. You know, so in essence, what are we doing to address the cost of living? And you hear it all the time. Tourists talk about it. Barbados has become very expensive. How do you people live here? And these are the questions you hear. And so, you know, so the whole issue about listing these things is one thing. NCDs, what is happening in terms of the care for persons who have to attend the hospitals and the polyclinics? So in other words, you are flagging this as a problem, but are you able to demonstrate to the world that you are dealing with these? And I would also want to say, how does Barbados benchmark itself against what the United Nations has developed to be implemented between 2015 when it was launched? That is the Sustainable Development Goals. I heard Marcia referring to some of those last night when you were talking about water. So in essence, you're talking, and I'm repeating myself for emphasis, you are talking, but are you able to say to the world, as I speak to these things, let me show you that I have taken Barbados forward. And in fact, we are not going backwards. And I will not hesitate to say, I will say it. And I can say it definitively, because if you want the evidence, I will go and bring it. When we look at our water woes, we are worse off now than we were 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we're worse off now than we were 3 years ago. And in fact, my understanding, and I noticed the guy at the UN having a challenge reading out the portfolio. He was trying to probably figure out if to read all the things that he was given. But the Prime Minister, from what I'm told, and somebody can tell me if I'm wrong, has now brought responsibility for the Water Authority under her ministry.
Yes.
And I listened very attentively last night to a description and a discussion by several persons who highlighted a number of problems, including major damage. And I want to emphasize this because we talk about contradictions. Major damage to one of the feeder wells, I think it's Allendale. And what was said was that you had a situation where, in looking to, and this is my layperson's description of it, if I'm wrong, the people from the Water Authority can come and correct me, that in attempt to deepen that well, this is my layperson's description, they
Mhm.
have damaged the coral cap, and under the coral would be matter, soil, or whatever else which discolors the water. So the question really and truly has to be, can the prime minister, as she is responsible for water, can she or any of the officials at the Water Authority, we've lost the CEO, I realize, can they tell us definitively that that is either true or it is untrue? If it is true, how do we correct it in the medium to long term? Because we have to find short term solutions which are temporary. But does it mean abandoning that well in some form or fashion and doing something else? Because we have heard about mains replacement, etc. But all of those things factor in. But if the issue of source, and I don't want to rehash a lot of what, because there's a lot I want to say about these contradictions. So again, the point I'm making when I talk about contradictions, as you go and you showcase and you get the applause and so on and the recognition, it really falls flat on its face for me when I look at our true domestic situation, because a lot of people will want to get upset. Now, let me read a couple other things that the Prime Minister mentioned in her opening one third of the speech, that she, or just less than one third. She spoke about the end of all forms of discrimination, crisis in confidence in the international economic order, disparity in treatment for people of people. She talked about the colonialist structure, racism, classism, misogyny. Now, I want to say this, as the Prime Minister was talking about end all forms of discrimination, I want to challenge the Prime Minister that as you talk about discrimination within the context of the global situation, you are talking about racial discrimination, and ethnic and cultural discrimination. But I want to say that there's partisan political discrimination in this country
Big
where
time.
persons with ability are sidelined, they are ignored, and they
Hmm.
are struck through. And I ask the
Hmm.
question, who makes the final decision about positions for public servants, entry level, middle level, promotions, etc., the assignment of consultancies, the choice of people to do work? Because at the end of the day, if we are living in a small country where we say our people are our biggest resource, and we do not allow people to make a reasonable contribution simply because they don't sing in the choir of the prime minister, then, and again, if people want, I can give them lists. I will give you an example. As a former lecturer at the university, I would have literally taught Pastor Nichols thousands of Barbadian students in management, the biggest department on the campus pretty much since it was set up in the mid 80s. And I tell people, do not, if they come to me for references, I say, if you want to go and study, I would suggest, if you can do better, do not use my name as a reference. And I'm not saying that because I feel it. I have heard feedback, I have received feedback on the situation. So, as I was saying, that when we start to talk about these things, we have to hold up a mirror to ourselves and ask ourselves, how does this translate into how we deal with Barbadians? So I am concerned that, for example, the Prime Minister made reference, and I wrote down her words, too many go to bed with our bellies hungry, and she talked about the spirit of the shared humanity and the principle of Ubuntu and so on. Ubuntu, of course, is an East African tradition, and you would have heard Mr. Newton speak about those kind of cultural
Yes.
considerations. So I am concerned that a lot of time is, there are two things. One, a lot of time is spent on saying the right things. But when it comes to Barbados, can we say categorically that as a people, as a government, as you know, as a head of government, in the case of the Prime Minister, that you are comfortable that Barbados, by our practices, whether we are talking individually or collectively and so on, are living up to some of these expectations? Are we just talking about it and leaving you know, the challenges that we have at home to continue to grow and fester, well, in terms of the negative kinds of things? Or are we able to say to the world, we can talk about this because we are doing something about it and we are achieving results? One of the things that I want to say, because I am conscious of the schedule that we have, I want to look at so basically what just to pull that together, what I've tried to do as quickly as possible is to highlight some of the things that the Prime Minister flagged at the United Nations General Assembly in her speech this year, to say that it sounds good and they speak to important issues internationally. But if you want to take it to another level, you need to be able to say to Barbadians, first of all, that you are able and you're willing, able, and you have delivered on making these things happen at home. Because it is like, as you open, you say spitting up in here and you know, all the rest that flows from that statement. If you are not able to say, look, we are an exemplar. I operate on this. People are appointed on the basis of merit. As a woman, I don't discriminate against other women because of their political differences or against other people on the basis of their political differences. I allow public officers to do their jobs in terms of selection and all of these things. I allow my ministers to do their job, because what I find interesting is that we have a Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Prime Minister will travel, and typically when the Prime Minister travels, the minister, especially in a case like a UN, the minister will travel as well. But we have a situation at home where, in relation to crime, I sat and I watched, as many Barbadians at home and abroad did, the Prime Minister sit down, and I will use the word that I saw circulating recently with some of her ministers looking like mannequins, not saying a word. Decisions taken, I can't tell you if those decisions were taken and discussed with cabinet, which I would hope they were. But then the Attorney General comes back to say, okay, the Prime Minister talked about that, but we now got to make it happen. And therefore we have to do this and that, when in fact there was an implementation date set, etc. So the question is, you start things, you do not empower your ministers to go there and do what they have to do. But Sharon, I will deviate and comment on this. And this is my personal feeling. And I shared it recently with some friends who were asking me about what's happening in Barbados. And my position was that, as I observe the Prime Minister at this point in time, and the amount of time she spends away from home on matters that, with proper briefing and proper understanding of their respective roles, ministers of government can take Barbados's position. And I will come back to that in relation to the UN in terms of how it works as a wrap-up comment. That if that were the case, the Prime Minister would spend more time at home. But I think that, as you said, her vision was to become the first female Prime Minister. But having done that, the analogy that I would use when we talk about people, many people say somebody wanted the job, but they didn't want the work that goes with it. And it almost appears to me as there's an avoidance of some of the things. So you come and you make a statement and then you disappear. But you, rather than allow the people who are responsible to get out there and do what they have to do, if your preference is to move around. So things almost come to a standstill. And that's not my interpretation. That's the interpretation of others with whom I've had communication, that sometimes things seem to come to a standstill. And in fact, when you listen to the many ministers that we have, there's almost 100% reference in every 100% reference every time there's a comment or statement from a minister. Almost 100% of the time, there is a reference to the prime minister and what the prime minister wants or says or thinks or has agreed to or whatever. So that is my concern. Now to the United Nations, and I said I'm not sure I corrected you when you mentioned that certain things were signed off. Now the truth is, the United Nations, and I think I have to make this point, is it may not be working as it is intended in a lot of instances, but the United Nations represents for many small countries and less powerful countries one of the mechanisms by which they can be what I would call global interdependence and decision making. Because what happens in a lot of instances is that you have situations where if we had to engage, let's say, the United States or the European Union as a country, or even as CARICOM, a collection of the 14 or whatever members of CARICOM, we would probably be at a major disadvantage, whether we're talking about trade issues, we're talking about crime, and so on. So the United Nations, as a multilateral institution, has an important role to play. Now, the key thing is that a lot of decisions are probably taken, but the implementation of those decisions, the implementation of those decisions is perhaps not followed through in the way that you want to. So, for example, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, where there was a commitment to end poverty and to realize a level of peace and so on, when we talk about human rights, etc., if some countries were left to their own, if some heads of state, heads of government were left to their own, when we saw some of the things that happened on the continent of Africa, reference was made to King Leopold. So for example, the ending of apartheid in South Africa, part of that would have happened through international pressure. So what I want to say is that a lot of what happens they're supposed to be ongoing discussion. I think you made mention, Pastor Nichols, of the future.
I have to do with you what Ralph had to do with us, and tell us call him Ralph.
Okay.
Call me Ferdinand.
All right, Ferdinand.
Ferdinand is fine.
But you see, the other one sounds much nicer. But anyhow, I will obey instructions. So
that's fine.
Basically, for example, it took 9 months of negotiations. So when there was a final acclamation, silence, or whatever, the expectation is that member states would have had their inputs into those things, and so that by the time you get to the fancy event where heads of state and foreign ministers and deputy prime ministers and presidents and vice presidents are present, the work is not done by the leaders. The work is supposed to be done by the public officials. For example, in Barbados, we have, or representing Barbados in New York, we have a permanent representative. And so that's the ambassador to United Nations. And we have a staff. Of course, a country like Barbados only has a couple people relative to, as compared to US, for example, who would have hundreds of people and whatever assigned. But the key point is that what we perhaps need, and I can say as a former foreign minister, I probably would have been guilty. Well, I can't say guilty, because you go to these things, you issue press releases, the media will probably not think it is newsworthy, or it's not sensational enough or controversial enough, so they don't keep you up to date. But I think what we need as people to do is to say, look, let us know what is the agenda. For example, this session ends, the General Assembly, as we have it in September, is, in essence, it goes from here to December, September to December. So the heads meet and they talk, but then there are things to happen. And, that's where the public officials, as I described them, sit down to work, and the technocrats, etc. So what we perhaps need to understand is what is it that we're getting into, and hear from the people, so that there's input or greater input. But so let me end by saying that, look, we have at this point in time to recognize, for me certainly, the importance of United Nations within the what I call the whole family of nations. It has an important role to play. The question is, are we satisfied that it is doing that? Is it overstepping it in some respects? Are there agendas that we are not
prepared to be a part of?
Prepared to be part of, and there's
Yeah.
scope for you to step back from those things, or are we getting roped in things that our citizens may not like?
Yeah.
But the important thing for me, as we look at it, when we go out there to speak, what is it that we are doing at home that reflects,
what
and
we're
there's some
saying
kind
there,
of synergies with what
we're speaking.
what we say out
Yeah.
there and what we're doing here. Is there a reflection? What is our reality?
Yeah.
Somebody's asked about the 90 million for water tanks. No,
And I think KEMAR will deal with that. I
okay,
think
I
KEMAR
see.
will deal with
So,
that shortly. But you don't go
okay,
anywhere,
fine.
though. You don't
So,
go anywhere yet. But funny thing, Maxine, is that when I watched several of her speeches, because she did a number of speeches in the UN in these smaller groupings and so on, and I was left. I don't think the correct word is struggling. I was left trying to connect the reality on the ground here in Barbados and what she was saying. And in a sense, it sounded, from my position as a religious minister, it sounded a bit hypocritical, because you're saying one thing, but on the ground in Barbados, we're not seeing that worked out, and hence you can't really, in that international arena, indicate, like you're saying, well, I speak to such and such a matter, and as we're doing this in Barbados relative, and those are the kind of things that went through my mind when I listened to her speech. And I don't want anybody to think, that, because sometimes, there are people that might think you just attack the prime minister for attacking sake, and that's not the fact. The reality is we're dealing in truth. We want to deal with what is really in the best interest of Barbados. And I must say that there's a time where I feel, you remember the old say we used to hear, make sure brain is engaged before putting mouth into gear. Remember that kind of thing. Are you thinking about what is going on at home before you begin to talk about it in these international circles? And as I said tonight, YouTube don't lose videos, and international people get to see those videos, even like for this show, and people watch it, and they watch to see the synergy between what the country is saying and what you're saying to them in that environment. Well, Maxine, as you know, is always an education sitting listening to you, always is, and partaking in it with you. I have always respected you tremendously in the political arena. You've always impressed me as a woman of integrity. I've known you for many years. I think you would go back. And I hope I don't betray your age.
That's all right.
But
Everybody knows. I've mentioned it a long time.
but I think you would have gone back into the days of not just my sister, but I think my mother would have had some interactions at some point in time as well. And from as far back as when I was just a young fella, I've always admired your integrity and the way you speak to matters. And I am honored to be involved with you at this level at this time. It's a real honor of mine. I see
Thank
KEMAR
you.
is in. KEMAR, my friend, so good to see you. That's a nice picture of you with a smile there, making you look so young. Um, KEMAR, how are you? Good evening. So nice
Yes,
to
yeah.
have you joining us tonight. And I know you're going to be jumping on some things tonight. I see some 90 million for water tanks. I don't know if you're going after that, but welcome, KEMAR. Such a joy to have you join us tonight.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Pastor Ferdinand, for having me. Good evening to you. Good evening to Maxine. Very happy to see you.
Hi, good
Um,
evening.
yes, I hope everything is going well on your,
Yes,
Um,
I'm doing all right. Rested and ready to go again.
Yes, that's good. Great to have you back in the hot seat.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
good night to all of the members of the loyal opposition. Very happy to be here. Good night to Marcia. Good night to Dave, Caswell, and all of the other persons who I may not be coming to name right now. But good evening to you all. Before I jump right into the fire and the baptism of fire, Pastor Ferdinand, um, I wanted to start with a reflective moment. Um, I'm sure that you could appreciate this intervention here before I jump in. It's a Bible verse I wanted to start with this evening, um, and it comes from the book of John, uh, verse 4, chapter 14, and it says that whosoever drinks of water
Your
that I will
mic is breaking up a little bit, almost like if you don't have a solid connection with the mic N.
um
Use it.
any better now?
Yeah, that's better, but maybe you shouldn't move around with the cable. It sounds like it could be a cable issue.
Right. Any better now?
Yeah, that's good.
Right. So where did I cut
You
off
were
for you?
you were quoting John 4:14, is it?
Yes.
Right.
So John 4:14 says, "But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will be thirsty again, and the water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water running up to eternal life." And to paraphrase a bit, it speaks about Jesus' coming, about the nature of salvation. And in those times, you had to get water from a well, Pastor Ferdinand.
Mm-hmm.
But in these times, we turn on a pipe to be able to get that water. However, persons who live among us right in Barbados do not have the privilege of turning on a pipe and getting clean water.
Mm-hmm.
That is to drink, to bathe, to cook. Right? We have the elderly, we have females in society, we have children, and people who live in parishes like St. Lucy, St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. Thomas, St. John, St. George, and parts of St. Philip um, don't have that privilege. So I just wanted to issue a word of encouragement to those persons who may be going through the disadvantage of not having running water. Uh, Pastor Ferdinand, that to remind persons that many of the things that we you know pursue in life, that we go through in life, is but indeed a challenge, and that we can get through it. And in attempting to get through it, we can offer temporary solutions to the problem. Right. So I said all of that to say basically that to be our brother's keeper in terms of giving water so that your brother and sister could be able to have a sit and donating to whatever causes or drives, whatever uh, infrastructure is set up there to be able to transport water to those persons who may require that water, Pastor Ferdinand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So even in the midst of a crisis like this, where persons out there suffering the lack of a basic necessity, we have the possibility again of corruption occurring, right? The possibility of corruption occurring. And I just want to ask questions. I'm not coming here to uh, point fingers tonight, but I just want to ask questions surrounding this water crisis itself, to tackle this water problem, right? Because this seems to be a Caribbean wide issue. Jamaica, Grenada, all over. And these Caribbean wide solution seems to be to buy water tanks, right? And there was a program rolled out in Barbados called a water tank program, and that program was started on the previous, not that one, not that one, not that one, not that one, right? The water tank program was rolled out uh, under the last government, and along with a plan for a desalination, right? And one of the desalination plants were located in St. Lucie, right? And this would have assisted the persons who were living there to have a solution, or at least some type of solution, offered to tackling the water woes in the north at the time, right? So the water is a persistent issue. It's not necessarily one side or not the other side, or whatever. It's a chronic issue that we have to deal with regardless of which administration is in. Now, there was this big announcement that hundreds of people are set to benefit from an enhanced water tank program, right? An enhanced personal water tank program. As you can see here, announced by the Barbados Water Authority. And it says, thanks to a $90 million loan from the Green Climate Fund, thousands of people will soon be provided with new water conservation facilities. And the Barbados Water Authority on Friday announced that the boost to its personal tank program, which was launched in 2017, has meant that more people can be included in the initiative. Speaking to the media at a press conference at Barbados Water Authority's Pine St. Michael headquarters, the head of project management office, Shelley Paris, said that the program, which falls under the Water Sector Resilience Nexus for Sustainability project, is being executed in collaboration with the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, and some 2,489 systems are to be made available. 9 tank systems to be used for potable water are to be erected at polyclinics and one at the QBH. 121 farms and 20 community centers are to be retrofitted with rainwater harvesting systems, while 16 potable water tanks and 22 rainwater harvesting systems will be installed at primary and secondary schools. Some 1,500 potable water tanks will be installed at vulnerable households, and 800 homes will receive rainwater harvesting systems. Work started last March, and to date, 1,115 systems, 681 potable tanks, and 434 rainwater harvesting systems have been installed in every parish except Christchurch, St. Michael's, St. Joseph. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Transport and Works and Water Resources, SANTIA Bradshaw, said the program was important as it increased the resilience of vulnerable families, improved residential resilience in the event of a natural disaster, and increased water security. Right. So he basically said that. But he also said that 121 kilometers of mains across the island need to be replaced to cut down on leaks, bursts, and water discoloration. However, he said the Barbados Water Authority was financially cash strapped, right? So you see that there was indeed a loan from the Green Climate Fund to increase the tank capacity of Barbadians, right? And they gave you a list of all of the parishes that systems were not installed in. And St. Lucie is not on the list, which means that tanks are supposed to be in St. Lucie. to tackle this water discoloration issue and water conservation XYZ, right? We can firmly assert that based off this article alone, and this was quoted directly from the project manager at the Barbados Water Authority. And this article was printed in 2023, which is March 18th, 2023. Right. What is also interesting uh, about this loan, right? What is interesting about this loan, Pastor Ferdinand, as you can see, is that a tender was put out, or so-called tender was then put out, Pastor Ferdinand, from the Barbados Water Authority, which spoke to a cancel it, which eventually they canceled the personal tank initiative. So the tender, right? You can remove this one from the screen and put the cancellation notice. So the cancellation of tender notice for the installation of the personal tank system at residential homes throughout the island. And this was published by the Barbados Water Authority on the 11th of December 2023. And it says here, yes. So it says here on the screen that the Barbados Water Authority wishes to advise that the notice inviting tenders for the installation of the personal tank system at residential homes throughout the island has been cancelled, and a revised notice to be published at a later date, and the BWA apologizes for any inconvenience caused. Now, I have not read any notice since this one or such saying that the tender was reopened to push forward with the personal tank program, Pastor Ferdinand and members of the loyal opposition, because I hope that you're hearing me when I put these facts forward, and I'm not just going through. But we
Yeah,
need
we're
to
hearing you. We're hearing you.
yes, yes. So we need to establish some facts. There was a loan for $90 million from the Green Climate Fund to assist in the personal water tank program, right? A program which was started under the last administration, which was continued, right? Which was continued. It was then put out the so-called tender, and then the tender was cancelled on December 11th, 2023, and no other notice was put out. Uh, so if we deal with the facts that were put on the table, because of whatever reason the government did not facilitate the project, the people of St. Lucie and the persons having water issues who don't have access to tanks should really be seeking compensation from the government if it is indeed they have plans on the table and infrastructure in place like this. Even borrowing $90 million to do it, and still has not facilitated the project today that people could be getting this discolored water, right? So we are asking questions, need some updates, and as was said, Pastor Ferdinand, it was rolled out under the Deputy Prime Minister SANTIA BRADSHAW under her tenure as Minister of Water Resources. We would like some more information on the loan facility and what has happened with that money. Now, I thought it ended there, Pastor Ferdinand, but I have to go backward a bit. You can recall there was a scenario when people in the countryside, St. John and those places were having challenges, and the government put water tanks there, and then the water tanks started to collapse,
That was in St. Joseph.
and parts of St. John.
Yes.
Right? No, it was said that those particular water tanks were procured by a specific company, right? And then after the water tanks would have collapsed or so, there was a row in between the company and the government, right? There was a row between the company and the government, a public row, by the way. It was not a secretive row. Um, I'm going to try to get it on my screen that you can see it, Pastor Ferdinand, and that everybody can see it, right? Because this particular issue is very interesting. Barbadians should be very cautious and ask questions. We're not pointing fingers, but I'm hoping you can see my screen. You might need to pull me in if you
Yeah,
can.
yeah, got you in.
Yes,
You can see it. You can see it.
yes. Right.
Good.
So it says row over utilities on tanks, tankers, and HQ. Um, Focusing specifically on the part about the tanks, and it says that the long-running dispute between this is Barbados today, by the way. The long-running dispute between the Barbados Water Authority and in the tax services over the latter multi-million-dollar arrangement made with the previous government has been resolved, and Mr. Abrams spoke to the issue, and he said that he further explained that the new loan agreement included water trucks,
Your your
community
your
tax,
your audio is getting
and
very
the
bad.
leasing.
Your audio is getting very bad at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah. Sorry, how about now?
That's clean. That's clean.
Yeah, right. Sorry, yes. So he said, and he said that the new agreement included water trucks, community tanks, and the lease arrangement for the BWA headquarters. Right. So you see clearly there, he spoke about the tanks, and he said that I am happy to say that we finally signed off on a deal with Innotech, and the deal is perhaps one of the most wide-ranging situations that we had to deal with, and it covered rental, maintenance, the building. It covered the water tanker trucks, the tanks used in the personal tank program, and it also covers some desalination units. Right. So we established again, Pastor Ferdinand, about personal tanks. Right.
What
So
date was
those
that? What date was that? Was that article?
this was published on the 14th of December 2019.
Okay.
Right. So we're going back. We're going back. I hope I'm not losing you.
Mm-mm.
Right. So when the specific tanks were destroyed or so, the government came in and removed those specific tanks from off the locations. Right. I removed those specific tanks from the locations. And I'm showing you a video now of those tanks that were removed, like those tanks that were removed from the personal tank program. Like, remember this? So hoping Dave could put up that video now that we could see. Um, we have a set of tanks just abandoned up at Golden Ridge Reservoir. Right? Just abandoned. Now you have, I'm saying there are some that look like they could be salvaged. Like there are some that look like they could be salvaged, but you just have them lying down there, rolled over like a dump, and nothing happening to these tanks. And these specific tanks were the alleged tanks that were removed, claiming that they were faulty and that they had uh, issues and defects and that they were crumbling at the top and caving in. And we saw some video, honestly, of a couple of them caving in, but majority of them were not caving in, Pastor Ferdinand. But here we have it up at Golden Ridge Pumping Station in St. George, a set of abandoned tanks belonging to the government, and you could clearly see that those were the ones set up to be initial community tanks, and those were removed and new ones put in place that were supposedly donated by the private sector. Right. So these abandoned ones are at Golden Ridge right now. Right. So I'm saying that as opposed to just have them there languishing and wasting and catching rats and cobweb and spiders and everything, you could at least clean them up and try to get some of these tanks that are just abandoned at Golden Ridge down to the people in St. Lucie. Right. So again, this reminds me of when they had the seaweed machine down at Concept, just there in the rain, rotting and wasting. This is a waste of money. Right. So I am saying that these tanks could be put to use somewhere somehow to provide a temporary solution to assist the people in St. Lucie, St. Thomas, St. George, and other places, even St. John, to aid for a bit, Pastor Ferdinand. My suggestion. Now, in moving past that part, I'm going to put up my screen again, right, and show you that the tanks, that those ones that you saw there abandoned, what was the criticism given to those tanks? Right. And it says that the Barbados Water Authority is being advised to take a step back and do an inspection of the recently donated tanks from corporate Barbados and admit it made a mistake. This caution comes in light of an apparent rupture of the several 1,000-gallon tanks donated for the Barbados Water Authority's Rapid Response Unit Community Tank Project and subsequent suggestions from the Barbados Water Authority that it was due to vandalism. However, Barbados Today investigations revealed that when the Rapid Response Program was conceptualized back in 2015, that similar 1,000-gallon tough tanks from the manufacturer Roto Plastics Barbados were used in the pilot project phase, and a number of them had collapsed. And it's understood that as part of the project, which was set up as a temporary measure to provide relief for residents who suffered from the perennial problem of water outages, several different sized tanks were used. Right. So after the rupture from the manufacturer sought to distance itself from those allegations, and it was decided that the 2,000-gallon tanks which were donated from the private sector were the best tanks to be used. Right, Pastor Ferdinand? So those tanks that were donated to the private sector are still the tanks that are up today. Right. Those are the tanks that are still up today in some areas. Now I passed through potholes in St. John and I checked both of them. One has in no water, one has in some water.
Mhm.
Right. The one at the top of the hill has in some water, the one at the bottom doesn't. Right. So it shows that a tanker is still responding to these portable water tanks and filling them up. So I'm saying here, right, that based off the fact that we borrowed, Pastor Ferdinand, $90 million to be able to do a tank program, right? A tank program, but I can't see $90 million worth of tanks nowhere in Barbados, right? Even if you look on all the schools and things like this, suggest they don't know. But just when I thought it was only $90 million, Pastor Ferdinand, um, I encountered another uh, potential for financing on the same tanks. So if you could pull me in one more time, right? If you could pull me in one more time, that I can get my screen up.
There you go.
Right? If you read that article, it says government approaches IDB to boost access to water tanks.
What's the date of that one, KEMAR? can't see it clearly.
June, the 6th of June 2023.
So that's
Right.
between the first one and you mentioned one in January or something like that. You mentioned another in December of 2023. So you mean between those two dates they went for another loan?
Well, you read the article?
Yeah, I mean, if I think you mentioned the $90 million loan sometime in January of 2023.
Yeah.
Am I correct? I mean,
Let me
correct me if I'm wrong.
let me get that date
Based
back
on
up.
the based on the based on the article you quoted from in the Barbados Today, that was 2023-03-18.
Right. That
Um,
was 3rd of March. I mean
yeah,
March 18th,
right. A $90
2023.
million loan from the Green Climate Fund.
Yeah.
That was in March. Now, and you mentioned that the program was suspended in December 11th or 13th or something like that. But this is now June of the same year. So you're suggesting to the loyal opposition that that you had an additional loan between those times?
Well, it seems that way I saw this because the IDB and the Green Climate Fund are two separate entities. So if we discuss the Green Climate Fund loan, and then we go on to discuss this arrangement here, which says that government is seeking assistance from the private sector arm of the IADB group to increase water storage capacity of Barbadian households. Our Prime Minister Mia Mottley announced to the National Stakeholder Consultation on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals on Monday evening that she had approached the multilateral investment institution for funding assistance for water storage tanks. This morning, we met with the IDB Invest and we discussed with them a commitment. I said to them, either you can or you can't because this trend is moving. That is, the Barbados Water Authority needs to have a revolving fund to allow Barbadians to purchase water tanks, she said to those in the audience at the consultation at the Lloyd Erskine Sandy Ferry Center. He also encouraged Barbadians to purchase their own water storage tanks and water saving devices, and those who can afford to do so on your own. You'll be negligent and you'll be doing yourself a disservice by not having the appropriate water saving devices in your
So so
bathrooms
what
and in your kitchens.
so what was the purpose of the $90 million loan? What has happened to that $90 million loan that was to supply tanks to the households of Barbadians?
Well, that is my question tonight.
I am asking the question just like you.
Right? And if you can, we need to also be updated on that last arrangement from the IDB about tanks. Now, based off the amount of money they board, the same way everybody in Barbados got a garbage can, everybody in Barbados should have had a water tank.
Well, you got
Right?
the $90 million. You got $90 million, and I'm not 100% sure the cost of those tanks, but I know the 1,000 gallon is around 1,000 and something dollars. I would imagine the 2,000 gallon, even if you put it at $2,500. And there are other things I appreciate that you've mentioned in terms of how the different aspects of the water aspect. Yeah, thank you very much, Lewis. Is saying the average price of a 1,000 gallon tank is 900 Barbados dollars. Um, you go ahead because I'm going to calculate $90 million by 2000 and see how many tanks that should be.
Well, it just shows you where there's wastage because if they knew and it was their solution to bring the tank program and to continue the tank program, it should have continued because obviously it was a great idea, right? That they sought to expand it. So it was already going. Now they remove those first set of tanks, Pastor Ferdinand, as
Well,
was said.
sorry to cross you, Kimar. By my calculations, even if you were to spend $2,500 per tank, I would imagine that there must be other things that are involved in it. You're talking about 45,000 tanks.
Mhm.
So there must be other things that they, um, I mean, 45,000 tanks. There are 100 and something thousand households in Barbados, about 106,000 households in Barbados. $90 million at $2,500 a tank would be 45,000 tanks.
But remember, not everybody will get a tank because there were some people who can't afford their own tank and who will not want the they will not buy tanks. So they will have leftover. And
But there are
I
people
have
who, in the construction of their home, to construct the house with the tank already in place. So there are a number of homes that already have tanks in Barbados.
it. No, the amount of times that they swipe the ATM card for tanks alone, St. Lucie should have been flooded with tanks, not water,
Yes,
right? And all of that rainwater that fell in St. Lucie, the people of St. Lucie should have had rainwater harvesting devices collecting the water if the government
correct,
had gone ahead with the plans,
correct.
right? Now, I hope this is not another hope
Harvest.
situation.
Oops.
I hope this is really not another hope situation.
But that's what the Public Accounts Committee is for, where investigations into matters that are of concern to the Barbadian public can be raised by the leader of the opposition with the government to give account for the expenditure
Like,
of monies
no,
that have been borrowed for purposes. That's what the
like,
Public Accounts Committee is for.
no, Pastor Ferdinand, I have one more point to share, and then I want to wrap up.
Mhm. That's okay.
I want to show you a billboard, right? A billboard that is plastered in. I'm hoping Dave could get it up for me. Uh, but I want to show you this billboard, and this billboard, if you see it, it says a lot. So this is located in St. John, right
Mhm.
opposite Pool Woods, by the gap that says over to Henley. And that billboard says Government of Barbados, Barbados Water Authority, Barbados Water Infrastructure Rehabilitation Project, funded by CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. Um, you see Stan consultant Stan Tech, and then you see a Chinese contractor
Oh
uh
dear. Oh dear.
under the bottom
Not
with
a Barbadian.
Sing Hydro Corporation. And you see the Chinese right there. This is posted right there opposite Pool Woods in St. John. This billboard, right? Now, I know you might not be able to. Sorry, I know you might not be able to see uh on the billboard, so I'm gonna try to read what is on the billboard that you can see it. If Dave can zoom in on the map of Barbados, you can see the word Bomiston.
Yep,
That is the pumping station. So
that's right.
everything is in red that you need to pay attention to. You could try to zoom out a bit that you can see the entire map, and if you can come around to the left, if you could, right now, everything is in red that you need to pay attention to. So it says here, Bourmiston, Pool Gully, Ozone, Lamberts. This is in St. Lucie, no, Lamberts, Allendale, Ashton Hall, Hamers, Rock Hall, Lodge Hill, Cave Hill, and Newmarket, right? And Newmarket. And this is in the billboard just plastered randomly out there in the grass, with grass as you can see growing on it. And I have not heard any discussion publicly, Pastor Ferdinand, from the authorities the Prime Minister, the Minister of Water Resources, SANTIA Bradshaw, Abrahams, nobody. About a contractor, uh, Shing Hydro, who has a contract to do a water infrastructure rehabilitation project. And the question should also be answered, why are these areas highlighted in red? So that ends my contribution for the night, Pastor Ferdinand.
Well, thank you for highlighting this area for us, KEMAR. Appreciate it very much because we're always having to try to find out what's happening with money borrowed. We had this happen with Hope. We had it happen with the sewage matter. I think there was another one that doesn't come to mind right now. There were three, as far as I recall. But it seems as if the government feels that they don't have a necessity or a need to account to the people of Barbados for the money that they have borrowed. It's almost as think they're going to be in government forever, and they don't have to explain to the people of Barbados what is happening where borrowing is concerned, because it has to be repaid. And this is the thing that bothers me personally, is that all of this money has to be repaid. We keep borrowing, 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 borrowing. We're not producing income. And I remember what Dr. Williams said to me many years ago: when your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep becomes your downfall. And we're borrowing money to do a number of things. And it's almost as if things are begun and then stalled or stopped or whatever, and you see all the material that we have spent the money in just wasting away. It's such a wastage of public funds. It's not. It doesn't belong to the government, to the prime minister, sorry, or to the members of parliament. It belongs to the taxpayers of Barbados. We're the people that got to pay this back. And so, if you have $90 million, and I'm looking at the article carried in the March edition of Barbados Today, where it speaks to not only the tanks, it speaks to the rain harvesting systems, 434 rain harvesting systems. What's the cost of a rain harvesting system? 681 portable tanks. Let me correct myself. It says work started last March, and today 1,115 systems. That comprises of 681 portable tanks and 434 rainwater harvesting systems have been installed. That is what they've indicated. They've indicated also 120 meters of mains across the islands needed to be replaced to cut down on leaks. Now, we don't know if that was actually done. It said needed to be replaced. They spoke of some 1,500 portable tanks will be installed at vulnerable households, and 800 homes will receive rainwater harvesting systems. So, on the basis of 1,500 and 800, that's 2,300 systems, and only 1,115 were disbursed in the process that was started last March. But then you tell us that the system was suspended in December. So what has happened since then? That's the question. What has happened to this project? Uh, this enhanced personal tank program. What has happened to that program? We need to have answers. What has happened to the $90 million? How has it been spent? It's that's basic accounting. And if Maxine was not, is it Maxine? I think Maxine or Marcia. That's basic accounting. And like I said, when I input $2,500 for a tank, and just talking about tanks, I'm talking 45,000 tanks. Here we're talking about 1,115 systems. So what's happening with all the others? Where's the money gone? It has to be accounted for, because the people of Barbados have to pay this loan. Barbados got to get up off their laurels and stop the nonsense. They really have to stop this nonsense. When we go out and do our marches, we can't get the people out. People don't come out as they should. We have a caller on the line, so let's take the caller, KEMAR. Just stay there with us, and let's hear what the caller has to say. Good evening, caller. How are you? Hi, good evening, caller. Not hearing anything. Good evening. Not hearing anything on the line here. Maybe we've lost them or they're not connected. Good evening. No, not hearing anything. Well, KEMAR, how do we given that the Public Accounts Committee that should be looking into these matters is being hijacked by the government? How do we? Is that the caller there? Hello, hello. Good evening. Good evening. Heard something just now, but not hearing anything now. Good evening. Hello. Yeah, KEMAR. While we're trying to get that matter rectified, what other methods, what other processes can we go through apart from the Public Accounts Committee that will hold the government's feet to fire to give an account um, of the matters of expenditure? I don't. I see Maxine. Maxine, I don't know if I can pull you in here in terms of. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can give me a thumbs up to let me know if I can go ahead. Great. Maxine, I mean, you've sat in government, previously for some years. Um, we're raising questions concerning the expenditure of something to. I mean, we're talking water tanks in this instance, $90 million. Um, we see that program started in March of 2023. Suspended in December of 2023 with an additional loan taken in June of 2023. How can one get government to give an account? You're muted. You're muted. You have to unmute.
I did that
Yeah,
when KEMAR was speaking. No, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
basically it has to now come down to what I would call people's pressure,
Hmm.
because the Public Accounts Committee, the structure of the committee, and so on, we understand the limitations. And I think that the chairman, Mr.
Hmm.
Thorne, has done what he can do by bringing to the public the challenges that he has. We now have before we even had an official leader of the opposition. KEMAR was bringing this kind of analysis, and I think that the government, and in this case, the Minister of Finance, who has all roads lead back to the Prime Minister, it looks like, but that's the reality. She's Minister of Finance. In this case, she is now Minister responsible for water and the Barbados Water Authority. We have, as I'm answering, I'm reading Nigel's question about the theft of hard drives and the problems and so on. We
Hmm.
have on this show, and I really have to say hats off to KEMAR, because he has done and continues to do the kind of analysis where people cannot accuse him or the Marcia Week show of just being sensational or being partisan political, and because at
Hmm.
the end
Hmm.
of these are serious political issues, because we're talking about governance and government. So all I can say is that using the information that we have, citizens who listen to this show need to bombard their members of parliament with this, and certainly the prime minister. We put it in the public domain. One of the things that you are able to do is to analyze the number of people who see this. So we have to say, look, government, we need to have answers, and you just have to go over this and just build a. I'm trying to There's a term they use, but in other words, we can prepare. Let me be simple, a checklist, and say these are issues that are outstanding. We want answers. KEMAR can list you dealt with who, you've dealt with this,
Dealt
you've
with the sewage.
with the sewage. We've looked at, So in other words, we need a compilation. So there's a running list of these things presented. You write to your MPs, you write the Prime Minister, because, and I don't only mean signing a single document, bombard them, because we have to have answers. It's interesting, and I will stick with the Water Authority because I am concerned when we look at the issue of the storage plant and all that transpired there. The same technical people who had to tackle the problem are the same technical people, minus one or two, who have retired or resigned and gone elsewhere, who have been dealing with these things. So these are the people who can provide the answers, whether it is trying to understand why a problem could not have been solved previously by you doing that. But the amount of money that we are talking about, that is part of the contradiction, that you're talking about all of these things, good governance and this and that and the next thing, but there's utter silence when it comes to asking for explanation. So as Hurricane Writer says, the PSC was castrated. I think the reality was that we recognize, I certainly as an observer and a person who understands the system, that given the composition, the chairman was going to have problems. And I'm sure I said it on this program, that where he is unable to have the members of the committee, the PSC, the Public Accounts Committee, not Council, the Public Accounts Committee address the issues, put them to the public. And I think, as far as I know how the system works, he can require as chairman of the Auditor General certain special audits, etc. And if, for example, if the members of the committee are required to sign on that, come to the public and tell them, because a lot of, in fact, some of the things that he'd be asked to look at are generated by this kind of discussion. This is another one that's added to the list. In fact, one of the things, and I would want to add this, because whenever I hear KEMAR presents, when he presents one of these examples, it makes me ask the question, how much money have we really borrowed? Somebody's laughing.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we have a caller, Maxine. So let's take the caller.
I pause.
Yes, yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Yes, good night. Good night to the panel. I think for too long now, with just a one person as a real opposition, if you want to call it, a seat, we are being too diplomatic with this situation of unsatisfactory governance. Now, St. Lucie has for too long been grappling with Tint water, right? That is one situation. And without going much further into the Tint water that St. Lucie persons had to endure for so long, it only asks, why can't the Public Accounts Committee be better, if not better, because it's not really being audited as far as I'm concerned, that the people and bipartisan can see. Then, as KEMAR is saying on the show, then you could actually, and yourself too, as well, then you could actually see where some funds could come in to assist the people of St. Lucie. It almost brings tears to your eyes that, without calling the person's name, a lady in St. Lucie I know, who when she told me, well, I can't even wash my son's white clothes that go to Queen's College. From something as simple as that to a lot of the elderly, well, obviously all people too, but most of the elderly are fearful of drinking water. So how long can a country continue with something like that, and just having a lot of global gift of gab speeches just to make the world see, and Caribbean, look at hear that speech. But is that speech or the speeches resonating on the ground? That is the question of the day.
Well, thank you so much, caller.
Are you
And
there?
are you still there?
Good.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm
you
here. I'm
still
still
there,
here.
caller? What would you
I'm,
suggest?
I'm,
What would you suggest
go on.
as what would you suggest to be one of the things we could do to put pressure on government to give an account?
The world has to, the same world that our dearly beloved leader goes to in Africa and parts of Europe and what's not, to make people see that democracy still exists in Barbados and the Caribbean. That same public needs to see that the Public Accounts Committee of Barbados is being stymied and for lack of words, with, I don't know what they call them, gatekeepers. That's the word I'm trying to
Hijacked,
find.
stifled?
That prevents the Public Accounts Committee. Come on, how could you have millions and millions here, millions there, and nobody can see how, for the last cent, it is being spent, where it is going, X and Y and K. You cannot. A country is what you are having is a country on paper as a democracy, but in practice, a growing dictatorship. That's what you're seeing.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much, caller. Appreciate you calling in. Maxine, he made the comment we are being too diplomatic with a bad government, and
No, too diplomatic. Too diplomatic,
yeah,
because when it was from the short, we heard a lot of phones and all sorts of the young people used to have a lot of talk about phones, this and also. I used to hear it because as far as I'm concerned, whether you are for BD and DP, a person ought to be respected. But up to today now, you have only one opposition person, and the intellectuals of the country, as almost as I don't hear the university. What is the University of the West Indies doing as it relates to apolitical research? All of a sudden now has apolitical research disappeared?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the things that you have to ask.
yeah.
If the intellectuals are silent, what tenet has them silent? Is it fear? Is it intimidation? Is it socioeconomics? Is it lack of cultural capital amassing that they can't sit? Well, some person can say, "No, she can't come from nowhere. She can't talk to me X and Y and K." I have X. I coined a name for all of that: Goliathism, where a person or a set of people can come to this a summary in their minds that he, she, they, or it is too small for me to even worry about. So it doesn't make any sense. They could talk, as you often say, could. We have this thing locked down. So if a country or person or entity has that mentality about a country, then you have to ask yourself, is the country only interested in partying and effects and big plates full? Is that what the country has come to? Or do we really need rigorous political dissection of governance? You have to ask that. Which is more important? Facts and big plates of food and water, or we need good governance? And the Public Accounts Committee being bipartisan, dissected, so that you can see the sheep from the goat from the fowls in the yard. So that is it.
But
That's
thank you.
what I have to say.
Thank you so very much, caller. We appreciate you with your input tonight. Thank you. Thank you so much. Maxine, let me just pop over to... Thank you, sir. Thank you. Let me just pop over to Nigel, Maxine, because Nigel, I think you saw the comment he made just now, and I wanted to get a little more information on it. Nigel, you made the comment that with regards to computer hard drives from the Barbados Water Authority and what is happening in St. Lucie, could you expand a little bit on that for us?
Yes, because you see, previously the location of the water wells were well guarded and so on, because there was the attempt or the need to protect them against maybe sabotage and so on. But recently they had problems at the Barbados Water Authority, and a number of hard drives went missing. So I am wondering, I'm just asking a question, is there a correlation between the missing hard drives and the water problems? we are having in Barbados. Okay? And
Hmm.
also, is there a connection between the level of development in the north of Barbados and the missing hard drive? And so somebody probably wanted to know where the water wells are and the underground aquifers are so that they can plan their development policy or plan their development, so to speak.
Hmm.
And this whole question brings me to this situation, to three questions. Really and truly, what is the nature or the quality of our democracy?
Mm.
Do we really have a democracy? And a government can behave in the way it is behaving, and the citizens cannot do anything about it? And then, must we, the suffering citizens of Barbados, sit down and languish in all this mess until the next general election? Must we? Huh? And are we not in a situation now where there is a definite need for decisive action against this abusive, disrespectful, and corrupt government? Are we not? I mean, where is our dignity as citizens of Barbados? Where where is our integrity, our humanity? And are we not responsible for our own destiny, our own security? Are we not responsible for ourselves? And must we sit back and allow our government to do as it please for as long as it wishes?
Well, within the context of that, Maxine, I'm coming to you in a second, but I don't know if Dave, you can put up that flyer to do with the water project. But as you mentioned that, Nigel, um, I just want to make sure the opposition, the Democratic Labour Party, is launching the water project. Last run in 2021, the water project went throughout Barbados to ensure that every person had clean drinking water when things got brung. Now we're back working with civil society to provide the citizens of St. Lucie with tint-free water. All donations are welcome at the DLP headquarters, George Street. Thank you. That number is up there. You can see the phone numbers. If you can make that a little larger, just so we can see those phone numbers clearer. Um, 823 8946 or 5470710, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Or you can email democratic1955 at gmail.com and offer your assistance. And that we can help by donating gallon bottles of water and buckets. This is a part of us as citizens reaching out to help each other. I watched a video today to do with the impact of Helen, is it Helen or Helena? Hurricane
Helen,
Helena, Helen,
Helen,
up in North Carolina. And the people were talking about how people were reaching out and helping each other. They weren't waiting on government to do anything. They were helping each other. And so I believe this is an excellent initiative in terms of encouraging Barbadians, to help one another, do what we can. And the Democratic Labour Party is initiating this effort. If it's a donation, maybe it's a gallon, a couple gallons of water that you can carry and leave there, deliver there at the George Street facility there, that they can distribute for St. Lucie. Maxine, you were making a comment before I went over to Nigel to
Yes.
get an explanation. That's very interesting, Nigel, that those hard drives have disappeared. Um, I don't. I'm going to reserve any comment. Go ahead,
Well,
Maxine.
I coincidence. There was an expression, and I remember it, but it was a description or definition of coincidence, which I found funny, and it included the notion of conspiracy in the definition. But I'll come back to that. No, the point I was going to make in relation to two things. One, in relation to the caller's concerns.
Yeah, and let me
And
just sorry, and let me just encourage you all to call, for we're here and quite prepared to take your calls. I'm sure KEMAR will be willing to answer, Maxine, Nigel, or myself. So please call in. There's somebody monitoring that area, so just go right ahead. Sorry, Maxine, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was saying in relation to the caller and your question about what we can do, I think Barbadians need to speak to these. I find it interesting, and perhaps some persons have been able to get into the minds of Barbadians and convince them that everything seems to be fine. Let me put it that way, that there was a time when there were problems and we talked about those problems. We even manufactured some of those problems, but somehow everything is okay. But I would say in the same way, and I was looking for it as I spoke, and something else came up, but I will share that in a minute because we were talking about travel advisories earlier. But in the same way that persons in Barbados made it their business to have international media houses cover issues in Barbados, we also can share this information. I don't know that I want to be the preacher of doom and gloom, but I also believe that there has to be some accountability for the resources that are acquired or borrowed in our name as citizens. And we're not talking about small change. $90 million are part thereof. In other words, the Barbados Water Authority should be asked, and we can ask that of as I said, the Minister of Finance, the current minister responsible for well, it now turns out to be the same one, but the immediate past, there have been about 3 or 4 ministers responsible for the Water Authority. And I would even say, I certainly would undertake to do an investigation, because the project that KEMAR spoke about started when I was a member of cabinet. Now, I may not be able to get all the details as to the full expenditures, but what we need to hear, there was a program started. It was canceled, but before it was canceled, money was spent. How much was spent? What was put in place? What was left to be done? Because the beautiful thing about these things is that government, the way government offices run, the persons responsible for the management of the finances, the permanent secretary, these people keep records. I tell people that I sat as a minister and pulled files and read information from the 70s and all kind of thing, depending on what it is. So questions need to be asked. I think that we have, and I'm sure KEMAR has summaries of all the analyses that he has done, so we can quickly go back and watch these programs, pull those bits of information, and start a campaign of calling on the government, starting with the Prime Minister as Prime Minister, with her as Minister of Finance, to tell people what has happened. And we can look at the timeframes. We know the ministers, and we can allocate and ask them as well, because at the end of the day, they should be able to answer. The government has changed how it deals with estimates, for example, and they bring public servants in the well of Parliament and so on. Well, tell them to give us permission to go or they ask on our behalf.
Yes,
provide the citizens with answers to those things. It's either right, wrong, or partially,
We have another caller, Maxine. Just
Okay.
on your thought there. Good evening, caller. How are you?
Good evening, Ferdy.
Yes, it is.
How are
Good
you
evening,
keeping?
sir. I'm keeping well, thanks.
Good.
Maxine,
And a good
everyone
evening to
calling?
Maxine. She's back and refreshed. And to Nigel.
Thank
and to
you.
KEMAR. KEMAR still has that book for me.
Oh, I think I know the voice now.
I'm
But,
trying to pick it up.
no, Ferdy claims to have sufficient interest in the North because he lives there. I remember the old Land Rover coming and picking up Ferdy and into to Colbert off cross country. And
You remember my
I have
mother playing at St. Lucy's
sufficient
Church?
interest because my maternal grandmother was from somewhere between Checker Hall and Salmon. And her father, who would have been my great-grandfather, he was a whaler in St. Lucie, and then they told me that after the whale population had decreased significantly off St. Lucie, he headed down to St. Vincent and started a new business and a new family. Now, the parish of St. Lucie reminds me of the city of Flint. You remember hearing about Flint in Michigan?
Yes, yes, sir.
Some time ago,
Yes,
with
sir.
this water contamination of the pipeline.
Yes, sir.
You can research it. And they had to shut that down, and you had to bring water into the people of Flint on a daily basis. And research shows that refitting costs over $460 million. And I don't think up to now they really have it as one would like. Now, I took an interest in this water thing from a day I heard people trying to justify that treated water is as pure as our natural water, which the treatment process tries to mimic. That is a joke. And Barbados has no right with us having to drink discolored water. The human eye is one of the best analytical tools in chemistry. And Ferdy, I would tell you that last night, what I saw, I could only conclude that that water is not fit for human or animal consumption.
Now,
I saw a gentleman remove the filter, and which would have extracted the impurities. And that sort of triggered the keystone in my conclusion. And that is, the aquifer from which this water is being pumped are contaminated. And whichever reservoir, and I'll get to that a little later down, whichever what reservoir or reservoirs there are should be closed immediately. Should have been closed ever since. I heard mention made of Allendale, Halfacre, and Boscobel. From listening closely, it seems as if Allendale, which is on the border, St. Peter, St. Lucie, is not the culprit. Is not the one that's contaminated from conversations I listened to last night on your program. Although a call did say that there was some discoloration, but I think that is built up in the pipelines in total. So that discoloration is not to be put down to the Allendale aquifer. All along, to be quite honest with you, hearing about this discoloration in St. Lucie, I thought that it was what we call rust until last night when I told you I saw that filter removed.
yes,
It had
yes.
a yellowish brown thick, what you call a sludge or slurry, reminiscent of clay. Now clay is what we call, it comes in what we call a chelated form, tightly bound up, 3-4 minerals, metals, okay? And the one which we would get here would be silica, which is sand, aluminium, and iron. Now, if this metal corrosion, this would be, if it were metal corrosion, it would have been of a different texture. It would have been flaky. But this one is not seems, it is slurry. You know when your mother did cake and you're in the kitchen just a bit, and she pulls it up, that is what I call slurry. Now, last week, the Ministry of Health put out an alert to boil water. And boiling does not remove color. So I instantaneously said, hey, there seems now to be another vector, another variable, and that is germs or microbial infiltration. So I put that down then to They must be bacterial, whether fecal or otherwise. And then there would be what we call protozoa. So that is a double whammy. Then we've been getting some very heavy rainfall in the north. And to my conclusion, I would say that this is the clay residue which would be coming into the aquifers from Highlander St. Andrew. I don't pretend to know a lot about geography. There's coming into Half Acre and Boscobel. So Half Acre and Boscobel would represent the two lowest levels of water at that point, but they would have drained, so to put it, Highland St. Andrew. Aluminium, as I said just now, is a tricky metal. It can exist in acid or basic medium. It can react in acid or basic medium. And then they tell me, or we know from years of experience, that once you get this heavy rainfall, you chlorinate, you spike a bit more with chlorine. That is, I ain't got no problem with that. But when you boil water which already has in traces, inverted commas, of aluminum iron, once it's coming from the clay, once you boil that with another additive, chlorine, I think you're shooting in the dark. So the best thing, as I said, would be to close down, decommission those two reservoirs. These two reservoirs should be decommissioned. That water is not fit for human or animal consumption. And then they say that resolution could be brought by changing pipeline, but it would take 2 years per kilometer, and then 25 kilometers to be done. That's 50 years. The whole stash should be gotten rid of, if that's the case. No. This is Flint. This is Flint, Barbados. You know? So we cannot do that. Listen, aluminium. Once it's tested, if it's tested, then it is aluminium. I beg different. But for now, I would assume now aluminium has been implicated in Alzheimer's. That's nothing to do with the AL and the AL. But this is something that you would have to look at as more than a matter of urgency. And this is where, if you don't have the money, and when I say close, I don't mean the workers, I mean the quote-unquote scientists, the chemical engineers, and the mechanical engineers. Be honest. If it's beyond you, say it's beyond you. And therefore, you could enlist some of those young, strong Defense Force youngsters. This is good training. And bring your water from St. Thomas ahead dead north as the highway ahead, and try to get it done in record time. But between now and such time, my recommendation for human beings would be to decommit, shut them down like last week, shut those two reservoirs down, keep the Allendale one going, and run water, ferry water in by truck or what? Same said very Defense Force and Water Authority. This is as much an emergency as if we had been struck by a hurricane, as how Florida has been. And I don't mince my words about it. That is how I feel about the situation. But I would talk at another time when KEMAR is on and dealing with his favorite topic of treatment of water. So thanks for listening to me, and good night, and you're doing an excellent job.
Well, thank you so much, caller. We appreciate your input and your enlightenment. St. Lucie, as my mother used to play at the St. Lucie's Parish Church, So I have a long history with the even with the Mount Gay Distillery, my and the family there. So thank you so much. Appreciate that your input and your contribution. Maxine, let me come back to you quickly. We have a few minutes just left. Just keeping an eye for any callers that may come. If you're going to call us, 236-7000. Maxine, just before you come on, I just want to make a couple advertising calls. We do need some help, guys. We do need some help with two refrigerators. I'm just putting this out there very quickly to you all of the loyal opposition. We need some help with two refrigerators for one family in need and another for an organization that feeds the homeless. We do need some funding for the next Solemn Walk, which is this coming Sunday. I believe it will be at 3 o'clock, and you'll hear more about that during the week. And there's a need for a wheelchair, a fully automated wheelchair, if that is at all possible. So let me repeat those three needs we have. Two refrigerators, one for a family that in desperate need, and a second one for an organization that feeds the homeless. Need for some funding for the Solemn Walk, unlike what I think a certain ambassador said about the Marcy Week show. We don't get money from the U.S. And a wheelchair, fully automated wheelchair, if that is at all possible. And then, of course, you see the add up. We are going from St. Mary's Church this time. If I can just take down that conversation and just move the call-in number for me, Dave, just for a minute. We are going to be going from the St. Mary's Church to Chapman Lane, and just slide it up a little bit. You can call 236-7000. Hot meals will be served to the residents. So we want to be able to give the residents some hot meals. We're asking you to bring some toys and gifts for the children. And if this is hosted by the Barbados Concerned Citizens, Praise Academy of Dance, Street Gospel Ministries, the Marcy Week Show, just slide it up a little bit for me, Dave, that I can just see the bottom of it, that we can let the people see who it's hosted by. Okay, that seems to be up to all. But I will say that the last solemn walk we had a couple Sundays ago was a very moving one for me, really, very, very moving. And I will encourage you, we want to bring our children out, our grandchildren out to be a part of it, so that, they can see what's happening in their country. So we're going to be going from St. Mary's Church to Chapman Lane, and that is this coming Sunday. So keep your eyes open, stay tuned to the Marcy Week Show for more in terms of what time and so on. I believe it would probably be around 3 o'clock, but there'll be more about that. So back to you then, Maxine. Let's let you finish off what you were. I hope you can remember where you
Yes.
were.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
But before I go back to that, based on what you were just saying, coming out of some conversations I had with some old school mates of mine, there's a Barbadian family in the U.S. who is willing to donate to our cause of supporting families in need across a mix of items. They're to establish to me what they are. The question I have, and this is to the officials at the Customs Department, in a case like that where this family is being very philanthropic and giving donations, and these are essentially new items, a cross section of things, clothing, maybe small appliances, home, how was the word I want? But items that
Home
family,
appliances and so on.
items that families can use, not major things like refrigerator or whatever, but it's maybe toiletries and that kind of thing. And the question is, how do we send it in, and what kind of duties would that be likely to incur? Because these are donations, people who have responded to what we're hearing, because the program is watched internationally, let me put it that way, and the Barbadians quite willing to help. But if
Yes.
it's gonna incur a whole set of, because it's costing us nothing to receive these. As I said, these are um, I can get a list of the kind of things that they're talking about. But I committed to getting some information on the process of getting them here and what happens to them when when they come into the island. Because if the Customs Department is going to impose a whole set of duties, I'm not going to be asking them, having extended their generosity to fork out, additional funds to pay duties. And if at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense, if it's going to cost too much, you could as well say to them, give us a monetary donation. But because of what they can get for the money that they have, the times that they buy these things and so on, they go to a sale, they may find linens, towels, you name it, bed sheets or whatever, and they can buy them at a sale and get much more than if they sent X dollars here. So I just wonder if is a way in which government can support our efforts by doing this. I know that in relation to the hospital, one of the things we did, because to avoid people just sending things down, there was a document prepared indicating what people, the kinds of things that would have been appropriate, etc., and how to do them so that it made the shipment easier. But this now is a group of people like the list that you just pulled up. The point I wanted to make quickly, Ferdinand, is, and notice I followed your instructions, is that we have in two things. One, if we go back to 2018, we will see that Canada, USA, and UK all issued between January and I would say May of 2018 advisories, or April advisories, in relation to the sewage problem we had on the South Coast. And I find it interesting that we heard by accident. And of course, these things were given full coverage in the local media. We also would have had coverage of those issues, which takes us back to the question, what do we do when we want to ask questions? Was it called the Tribune, the Telegraph, sorry, in the UK carried a feature. There was a Julie Bradshaw, I think was the name of the writer, who wrote a story. So maybe we can send her a story and ask her to do like what she did, having had a request previously, to write about some of the concerns we have. I will share that title and the article probably with you. I have it somewhere. I was just reminded of when it came up. So two things. One, we can solicit, again, I repeat myself, the responses from those decision makers who constitute cabinet, by providing them with a dossier of all the issues that have been identified by KEMAR, the problems, the figures, and ask them to talk, not to us only, but to the public, because we've not seen any responses. I think maybe we had one minister appear on the show. If I didn't see the show, but I think there was a time, but no, it wasn't the show. It was on KEMAR's show, Alternate Views, when we had Minister Humphrey, right? KEMAR, I think, appeared on the show. But we can prepare that dossier, colleagues, and ask them to talk to the public. And we just let it grow. So it'll be a living document, so to speak. That is what I wanted to suggest further.
Well, regarding the items that people wanted sending, I know what we used to do as a charitable organization. Of course, we can do that through the church. Is that we have a duty-free concession generally for most things pertaining to worship and so on. But then when we wanted to bring things in for distribution to assist, poor people and so on, we would provide a letter from the fellowship to the I think it would be the Ministry of Finance, requesting a waiver of all duties, taxes, and value-added tax, because of what was going to happen with the goods. So that, I believe, is one aspect that you can engage.
I'll explore
in terms of that. Yeah. In terms of that distribution. We also need to get some help, loyal opposition. I think it's this coming Saturday. Let me check back on my notes here. This coming Saturday in St. Lucie. If you could let me know, Dave, the time. The time is there, to meet at George Street Auditorium for 10 o'clock on Saturday the 5th. That's this coming Saturday. They need some volunteers we will go to St. Lucie and distribute the water that's collected. So if you can give a donation, that water can be purchased, or you want to bring your gallon of water or whatever, maybe a what you call these? They're not crates because they come all wrapped up in plastic now. 24 to a case, I think, a case of water, that type of thing. Please drop it off to the Democratic Labour Party office. They're going to be doing a distribution. We need some volunteers to assist with that in St. Lucie on Saturday at 10 o'clock. If you drive a truck as well, that would be of great value. I think it would be of value too if you could bring the truck along with you. You could bring the truck along with you and volunteer the truck just for the morning. And let that good nature Barbadians be seen. And people will take the videos of it and post it on YouTube and so on, where people can see what's happening in our country, how people are rising to the occasion and assisting each other. KEMAR, you hit on another point tonight, and I don't know if we're 4 minutes past 10. I don't know if you have any final words you'd like to share with us, but I'm curious to find out what that funding was that you referenced in June of 2023, in addition to the $90 million.
Yes, I would like to know as well,
You mean
but
we don't know?
we don't know. We don't even know how, the amount that was borrowed.
Wow.
I think we need
Okay.
an investigation on the Barbados Water Authority, a full audit as it relates to all loans received and all financings received. Um, because even with the charitable thanks that were received, an account was set at Republic Bank to allow uh, these donations to be made through there. So
Hmm.
the same money for the sewage, um, it came through the Barbados Water Authority. I know this 90 million is coming through the Barbados Water Authority, and the debt for climate swap is coming through the Barbados Water Authority. So, as Maxine said, we have about 4 ministers already. I know the Prime Minister has taken it over, and we are seeing this narrative of climate change become ever prevalent. And the next move they're setting us up for is that Chubby Water Plant over there as a solution to the water shortage. So as they're setting the stage to introduce this uh, so-called new technology as the savior to the water problems in Barbados. So it's better you use the treated sewage water than no water at all, if you understand the choice,
Hmm.
Pastor
Yes,
Ferdinand.
yes, yes.
Uh, so I just encourage persons to be vigilant, ask the questions, do individual research as well as was in terms of what's best for you. But there are solutions on the table that could be deployed almost immediately or to the short term, immediate term. There are desalination plants in St. Lucie, Pastor Ferdinand. I know that for a fact, and they could be deployed to help ease some of this burden. Um,
Absolutely.
some of the tanks, um, wasting those tanks just there. I know a couple of them could still be used to deployed for smaller amounts or so, and to help persons temporarily ease their plights, because through all of this, the suffering of the people uh, is very hurtful, Pastor Ferdinand, not to have access for basic things, even brushing your teeth, washing your
Hmm. Hmm.
face, going to the bathroom and stuff. Um, so not in 2024, but like I said, this is a Caribbean way problem,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
Jamaica has extensive problems with water, Grenada, St. Vincent, through the entire Caribbean. So the thing about climate change and climate financing, we need greater transparency in Barbados, focusing specifically on the Water Authority, the Green Climate Fund, and anything that is climate related financing that is coming through the Barbados Water Authority, especially now that it is under the office of the Prime Minister.
Well, thank you so much, Kimara. I'm actually just reading from this pack for the future that Lazy Foundation for a New Global Order I was just reading from the document that one of the aspects is that they are to address and promote the prevention of water scarcity and build resilience to drought to achieve a world in which water is a sustainable resource and ensure the availability and sustainable management of clean and safe water, sanitation, and hygiene for all. So let's hope that they can get that done and we can get that done properly. I have a problem with this jobby water. I don't see any reason why, in terms of all the rainfall that we have had, where's it gone? Why are we having to supplement our natural resources? I hear a lot about climate change. I've heard a lot about climate change. I'm looking at both sides of the coins, and there's some very important observations on both sides of the coin. Those who are for, those who are against. Some of the predictions that have not come to pass over the last several years, and I think it's something that needs to be investigated a bit more. Even as I have looked into the matter of electrical vehicles, we hear all about electrical vehicles, we hear all about the removal of fossil fuels, but one of the most reliable producers of electricity happens to be fossil fuels. And to my mind, all that needs to be engaged, because I've been in the automotive industry for a long time in my life, and I have watched automobiles develop to become extremely efficient in how it puts out the fumes. There you get certain types of exhaust filter systems that absorb certain things before they can leave. I'm sure things like this can be done in the production of fossil fuels that will help to reduce any impact on the environment. But that's another subject for another time. So before we wrap and go, I don't know if Nigel, there are any closing comments. Give you 1 minute. 1 minute is a long time. Maxine, give you 1 minute. I was amazed how much you could say one in 1 minute on
Yes.
TV, and we're technically on TV. So Nigel, I'm gonna let you go first, and then let the former Minister of Foreign Affairs bring up the closing over.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Ferdinand. My closing comment is simply this. I commend Shaquani Hunt and the Young Democrats for the initiative they have taken in assisting the suffering people in St. Lucie.
Wow.
However, my recommendation would be for us to discontinue all development projects in the north of the island and an investigation be carried out into the source of the contamination of our underground aquifers. Until we have the courage and the strength to do that, we will be just maybe spinning top in mud.
No pun
So
intended.
we have to look at the level of development and how it is impacting the underground aquifers and leading to contamination.
Thank you so much, Nigel. Maxine.
Yes, I want to follow up on follow Nigel in his comments, and to say that food, water, and shelter are absolutely critical to any human
Yes.
being, and certainly to
Yes.
Barbadians. As he said, the work that Shaquani and the Young Democrats are doing, that is to alleviate a problem, but he has touched on what has to happen or what needs to happen, and that is to identify the source of the problem, or perhaps let the public know the truth. What exactly is the problem, and how do you propose to fix it? Because and somebody sent me a message as we were talking, and they said, please stop describing it as tint. A tint is not something. In other words, the brown
Tainted.
nature of that water is certainly not a tint. I was trying to find it quickly, but I sent it
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. I
chat.
saw.
You
I
will
saw
see
it.
it. And so the person is saying it is dirty brown water, and we have to speak to it in a matter that reflects the seriousness. That is much
Yes.
more serious
Yes.
than. Yeah, I mean, I understand why people did that, but
Yeah.
as was pointed out, the problem to be solved has to be identified. and if known, articulated, and a commitment to solve that problem has to be taken. Anything to support the people is welcome and very important, but there must be a long-term solution. I have relatives as close, one includes my brothers, my late brother's family, and they have been suffering, and as along with everybody else. And all Bajans will know or have somebody. The problem must be solved. Spend some money dealing with it. And I listened very carefully to what he said, and Nigel was very clear. And I think in all that he said, there's some very significant words to be taken to heart.
Yes, absolutely. I must say that it's been a really encouraging session tonight as we've looked at these aspects. We want to thank you, KEMAR, for bringing this again to our attention. And, we as Barbadians, we just simply have to stop talking and start to act. We have to get up and get and stop the partisanship, and it's in the well-being of our country and our future, really. And I believe that we should make our presence felt at what you call these meetings again, constituency meetings, and get in their face. So what it is that Maxine Waters said. I mean, I want to go to the extreme she went to, but if you see them in the supermarket, if you see them in the gas station, wherever you see them, get into their face and tell them, about the issues and challenge. We want accountability for what is happening in our country, especially in this area that we have addressed tonight with water in St. Lucie. So, just as a reminder, for all of you, the loyal opposition, we do need that help, the volunteer help on Saturday, 10 o'clock. To assemble at the DLP headquarters, and this is not a partisan matter. Folk, can we please get past that nonsense and realize that in this instance we are dealing with the well-being of our Barbadian family and other
Mhm.
Barbadian citizens, and it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. Come and help so that we can put some good, fresh, clean water in St. Lucie and show the people of St. Lucie that they're not behind God's back as we used to talk about it many years ago, but they are very much a vital part of the community of Barbadians. All right. So this coming Saturday, assembling at the DLP headquarters for the distribution, 10 o'clock, and then head to St. Lucie to do the distribution. Of course, we have the solemn walk. Again, this is in remembrance of those who have lost their lives over the past several months through gun violence and gang violence. From St. Mary's Church to Chapman Lane, we'll be serving some hot meals. And we want to encourage you to bring toys and gifts. Bring some, when they say toys and gifts, I would suggest to you bring some coloring books and some crayons and that kind of thing, that the children can get some educational component while they're playing, coloring their books and so on. So, and it doesn't take a lot, folk. My mother, well, the Jamaicans used to say, or they still say, every mickle make a muckle, I think is how they put it. My mother used to say, look after the cents and the dollars will take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So every little bit is important. You might be only able to bring a book and maybe a package of crayons, but you don't know what that will mean to a child in Chapman Lane to get that. All right. So please travel with that on Sunday evening. You'll hear more about that. I'm sure Marcy will share more about that on Wednesday. Some of you have been asking about her tonight, but as she takes a bit of a break on Mondays and leaves me in the driver's seat on Mondays, of course, she's free to come in anytime. And I really am honored to that she could feel that I can be trusted to guide the show in that manner, because when I have challenging people on like Maxine and Nigel and and so on, it's exciting, and it's a joy having them with me. So for all of you, I know you're waiting for those two favorite songs that you have, and I know Dave has them queued up. Just let me say, Nigel, it was a joy having you on again tonight. Thank you for your input on the whole aspect of the goodness, what it's called again, the
Genocide.
genocide. I was trying to remember the word genocide of the black race, and is something that we do have to pay attention to. And thank you for keeping us aware of the connection between the past and the present as we live in the days ahead of us. And Maxine, again, an absolute joy having you on all the time. Real pleasure to have you on with your tremendous insights. And what can I say about you, KEMAR? You're an you need to change your profession and become a private investigator, PI. you keep digging up things, boy. I tell you that nobody even thinks you can find. But again, thank you so very much. And to you all in the loyal opposition, we couldn't have a show without you. Every single one of you, we really appreciate your being here. Remember to give us those thumbs up. Remember to like the show. The more you like it, the more it will spread. So 765 of you are left. Let's make sure that we can get up to 765 tonight on that thumbs up. All right. So God bless you. Have a great evening, folk. It was our pleasure being with you tonight. Keep Caswell in your prayers. He hasn't been feeling well. And of course, Marcia, she's doing fine, but just keep her in your prayers as well. And it's been a pleasure being the host for the show tonight. So God bless you. Have a great night. God bless you.
Promise us a better tomorrow. Tell me that it's suffering done. Me a take the vote and let me down. Me a take the vote and let me down. She did only want little dealing, big contracts and not corruption. Me a take the vote and let me down. Me a take the vote and let me down. Barbados is too small for me. My pocket full, now you and job they promise me. And a girl like me want power and more money. You cry transparency, but that's a no for me. Promise us a better tomorrow. Tell me that it's suffering done. Me a take the vote and let me down. Me a take the vote and let me down. She did only want little dealing, big contracts and not corruption. Me a take the vote and let me down. Me a take the vote and let me down.
Dancers, come forward, walk out. This one I got worldwide.
Just days after former government backbencher Ralph Thorne crossed the floor, he's taken the oath of office as leader of the opposition.
Cross the floor, let me do it some more like Ralph Thorne. Ralph Thorne. On the other side, cross the floor, cross the floor, cross the floor, let me do it some more like Ralph Thorne. Wait there, Ralph Thorne. Dancing, come back again. Our turn is the latest trend. Everybody know link up my friend. This one designed to be
and more will be left over.
Dancing, come back again. Our turn is the latest.
Are these trips so important?
Link up my friend. This one designed to be living our men.
Yes, I'm for real, member. I am for real. Don't let me talk out your business. Don't let me talk out your business. All right.
And I can't decide, so I'm moving with the die. Cause I'm ready to mash up the body. Oh gosh, I can mash up the body. So let me do this now. Cause I'm ready to mash up the body. Oh gosh, I can mash up the body. Yes, and let me go now. Cross the floor, cross the floor, cross the floor. Let me do it some more like Ralph Thorne. Ralph Thorne. On the other side, cross the floor.
There has to be some order here.
Cross the floor, let me do it some more like Ralph.
The Minister of Finance is not party to this present transaction, Your Honor. Ask him to keep quiet, please. And I say to you further, Mr. Speaker, that my conscience, my location here is related to my conscience. I said it last year. It is well with my soul.
Take a wine on the left side, and I can't decide, so I'm moving with the tide, moving with the tide. Take a wine on the right side, take a wine on the left side, and I can't decide, so I'm moving with the tide. Cause I'm ready to mash up the body. Oh gosh, I can mash up the body. So let me do this now. Cause I'm ready to mash up the body. Oh gosh, I can mash up the body. Yeah, and let me go now. Cross the floor, cross the floor, cross the floor. Let me do it some more like Ralph Thorne. Ralph Thorne. On the other side, cross the floor, cross the floor, cross the floor. Let me do it some more like Ralph Thorne. Ralph Thorne.
That is my man, so whether he cross or in cross, he will always be there for us.
I came to a point where I had to take a decision. that if my philosophical and political views do not accord with those of government in terms of its legislation, in terms of its policy, the relationship becomes untenable.
I was waiting for the last one because Dave,
I know this more.
Not English, English. Pretending to be good. I pretending to be good. Just pretending to be good. I pretending to be good. I just pretending to care about people. 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 Pretending. And I'm pretending to be good at maths nor English. I just pretending to care about people. And I'm pretending to be good at maths nor English. I just pretending to care about people. I'm pretending to be good. And I'm pretending to be good at maths nor English. I just pretending to care about people. And I'm pretending to be good at maths nor English. I just pretending to care about people.
Oh, goodness gracious me. But thank you. God bless you guys. Thank you, Dave.
Take care. Have a good evening.
Good night, Maxine. Good night, Nigel, KEMAR.
Take care. Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.